What happens when the most powerful man in the kingdom realizes the throne he bled for wants him dead? King Draven Caelthorn built an empire on fear and violence, crushed rebellions with his bare hands, and turned wolf clans into obedient soldiers. But now something ancient is eating him from the inside out. 49 days until the eclipse. 49 days until the curse destroys him and the empire tears itself apart. The only person who might save him is a mountain girl who should hate everything he represents. This is a story about power, survival, and what happens when a king has to choose between his throne and his soul. Stay until the end because this gets darker than you think. Drop a like and comment your city below so I know my pack is watching. The war chamber smelled like old blood and desperation. Draven Caelthorn stood at the obsidian table with both palms pressed flat against maps that meant nothing anymore. Territorial lines drawn in red ink, supply routes marked in silver, symbols representing armies loyal to the Iron Throne scattered across parchment like promises made by liars. He was dying, not the kind of death that came from a blade or poison, not the honorable kind where you saw your enemy's face before the light went out. This was something worse, something that crawled through his veins like broken glass and whispered that everything he built would collapse into ash the moment his heart stopped beating. The curse had been inside him for 6 weeks. At first, he thought it was exhaustion, the weight of holding an empire together when every noble house wanted to carve out their own piece of power, the constant pressure of being the apex predator in a kingdom full of wolves who measured their worth by how close they could get to your throat before you noticed. But exhaustion didn't make your bones feel like they were cracking from the inside. Exhaustion didn't turn your wolf into something feral and uncontrollable that tried to claw its way out of your skin every time the moon rose. Draven straightened and felt the muscles in his back spasm, sharp pain like claws dragging down his spine. He didn't let it show on his face. A king who showed weakness invited challenges. A king who flinched gave ambitious men permission to start measuring the throne. Lord Malric Voss sat in the corner of the chamber watching him with those cold, calculating eyes that never blinked enough. The king's cousin. First advisor. A man so intelligent he made strategy look like breathing. And Draven didn't trust him for a single goddamn second. The problem with surrounding yourself with predators is you can never be sure which one is waiting for you to stumble. Malric tilted his head slightly, just enough to look concerned without actually caring. Your Majesty, the healers are requesting another audience. They believe the symptoms may respond to... No. The word came out flat and final. Draven had already seen every healer in the kingdom. Herbalists who burned sage and muttered incantations over his chest. Physicians who bled him until he felt hollow. Mystics who claimed they could read the sickness in his aura and prescribe meditation like it would stop the wolf inside him from turning into something monstrous. They were all useless. This wasn't a sickness that responded to remedies. This was something older, something designed specifically to destroy him. Malric stood slowly, smoothing the front of his black velvet coat. The movement was too graceful, too rehearsed. Everything about Malric looked like a performance carefully constructed to appear effortless. Then perhaps we should consider alternative sources, the advisor said quietly. There are rumors of a healer in the Northreach Mountains. A woman with unusual abilities. Draven turned to face him fully. The movement sent another spike of pain through his ribs, but he kept his expression carved from stone. What kind of abilities? Malric smiled. Not the warm kind, the kind that meant he was holding information hostage until the exact right moment. She communes with wolves, Your Majesty. The wild ones. They say she can hear their thoughts, feel their pain. Some claim she's touched by old magic. Old magic. The words sat heavy in the room like smoke. Draven had spent his entire reign trying to eliminate the superstitious bullshit that held the Empire back. Nobles who consulted moon phases before making decisions. Generals who refused to fight on nights when the stars looked unlucky. An entire generation raised to believe power came from destiny instead of discipline. But old magic was different. Old magic was the kind of thing you didn't dismiss because the stories went back too far. Before the Empire existed. Before the wolf clans learned to walk on 2 legs and pretend they were civilized. How reliable is this information? Draven said. Malric's smile widened just slightly. Very reliable, Your Majesty. I've had eyes on her for quite some time. Of course he had. Malric always had eyes on things that might become useful later.
That was what made him dangerous. He collected secrets like other men collected gold, and he never spent them until the value was highest.
Draven walked to the window. Beyond the glass stretched Blackthorn Citadel in all its brutal elegance. Obsidian towers rising like claws against the sky, silver banners snapping in the wind, courtyards filled with soldiers who would die for him because they were more terrified of disappointing their king than facing an enemy blade. This was his empire, built from violence and sacrifice, and the absolute refusal to let anyone take what was his. And now some invisible enemy was trying to steal it from the inside. "Send riders to the mountains," Draven said. "Bring her here." Malric bowed. "As you command, your majesty." He left without another word, and Draven was alone with the maps and the pain and the wolf inside him that wouldn't stop howling. The truth about leadership that nobody tells you is this: the higher you climb, the more alone you become. Every decision you make creates enemies. Every alliance you forge comes with a price. Every moment of compassion gets weaponized by someone waiting for you to show weakness. Draven had learned that lesson the hard way. He'd been 17 when his father died. Barely old enough to grow a beard, but old enough to understand that hesitation meant death. The noble houses had circled immediately, testing him, pushing boundaries, waiting to see if the young prince had the spine to hold what his father built. He'd executed 6 lords in the first month, not because he wanted to, because the alternative was civil war. That was the thing about power at the highest level. It wasn't about being cruel. It was about being willing to become cruel faster than your enemies expected, about proving you would do whatever it took to survive before they had time to organize against you. Some nights he still saw their faces, the lords he'd killed, the rebellions he'd crushed, the villages he'd burned because they chose the wrong side and examples had to be made. He didn't enjoy it, but he didn't regret it either. Regret was a luxury reserved for people who didn't have empires sitting on their shoulders. Draven pressed his palm against the window glass. The stone was cold. Everything in this fortress was cold. He'd designed it that way. A constant reminder that comfort made you soft and softness got you killed. His reflection stared back at him. Gray eyes shadowed with exhaustion, jaw tight with the effort of holding everything together. Scars visible along his neck where an assassin had gotten close enough to draw blood before Draven tore his throat out. That had been 3 years ago. The assassin had been sent by a rival Alpha who thought the throne looked better with someone else sitting on it. Draven had tracked down everyone involved in the plot, 17 people total. He'd killed them publicly, slowly, made sure every noble in the kingdom understood exactly what happened when you reached for a crown that wasn't yours. The violence had been necessary, but it had also been exhausting. Because the truth was this: you could never kill enough people to make yourself safe. There was always another ambitious lord, another hungry wolf, another person who looked at you and saw an obstacle between them and what they wanted. Power didn't bring security. It brought an endless cycle of violence that only ended when you were too weak to defend yourself anymore. And now something was trying to make him weak. Draven felt the curse shift inside him, like something alive moving through his chest. He pressed his hand against his ribs and felt his own heartbeat irregular and wrong. 49 days. The mystics had been very specific about that timeline. The eclipse was coming, and when it arrived, the curse would finish consuming his wolf. His human side would collapse. The bond that held him together would shatter, and then chaos. Succession wars that would tear the empire apart. Noble houses slaughtering each other for territory. Wild wolf packs raiding human settlements. The fragile peace he'd built through blood and intimidation collapsing into anarchy. Millions would die. Not because they wanted to, but because that's what happened when empires lost their center. Draven turned away from the window and walked back to the war table. He stared down at the maps, at the territories marked with symbols representing power structures held together by fear and force. This was his legacy. Not glory, not prosperity, just order maintained through the constant threat of violence. And now he was asking some mountain girl with old blood to save it. The irony wasn't lost on him. 16 years ago, he'd given the order to eliminate the First Bloodline, the original wolves who predated the Empire, the ones who carried magic in their veins and power in their bones and represented everything his father had warned him about. Old blood breeds old ambitions, his father had said. You can't build a new empire on ancient foundations. They'll always want what they lost. So Draven had hunted them down. Systematically, methodically. Every family that carried the old bloodline, every person who might one day decide the throne belonged to them instead of him, he'd killed parents, children, entire family lines erased because they represented a threat to stability. And now the only person who could save him was the last survivor of the bloodline he'd tried to destroy. The universe apparently had a sense of humor. Draven leaned against the table and felt another wave of pain roll through him. This one was worse, sharp enough to make his vision blur. He gripped the edge of the obsidian surface and waited for it to pass. When it finally did, his hands were shaking. He looked down at them with something close to disgust. These hands had broken bones and signed death warrants and held together an empire through sheer stubborn will. Now they trembled like an old man's. The door opened without warning. Draven straightened immediately and forced his hands to steady. Weakness was currency in this court. You couldn't afford to give it away for free. A servant entered carrying a sealed letter. She bowed low enough to make her spine curve. Your Majesty, from the captain of your personal guard. Draven took the letter and dismissed her with a gesture. She left quickly. Smart girl. The servants who lasted longest in this castle were the ones who learned to be invisible. He broke the seal and read, The healer has been secured. 5 days until arrival at Blackthorn Citadel. 5 days. 5 days to prepare for the moment when he looked into the eyes of the last person he should have let live and asked her to save his life. Draven wondered if she knew. If someone had told her that the king who summoned her was the same man who ordered her parents executed, the same man who hunted her bloodline to near extinction. Probably not. Information like that was expensive and dangerous. Most people who knew the truth had learned to keep their mouths shut or disappeared quietly. But she would find out eventually, and when she did, he'd have to hope she valued the Empire's survival more than her own revenge. Draven folded the letter and let it fall into the fire. The parchment curled and blackened, turned to ash, like everything else in this kingdom eventually did. He walked to the weapons mounted on the wall and ran his fingers along the blade of his father's sword. The steel was dark and perfectly balanced, stained with the blood of 100 battles fought to build something that would outlast the men who bled for it. His father had believed in legacy, in building something so strong it couldn't be destroyed even after you were gone. Draven had believed that too, once, before he learned that empires didn't survive because they were strong. They survived because the person holding them together was willing to become a monster to keep them from falling apart. And now the monster was dying. He wondered what his father would say if he could see him now. Probably something about how weakness was inevitable, and planning for succession was the mark of a true leader. But his father had never faced a curse designed to destroy him from the inside. His father had died in battle, clean, honorable, the way a king was supposed to go. Draven was being eaten alive by something he couldn't fight. There was nothing honorable about that. He turned away from the sword and walked back to the window. Outside, the sun was setting over the citadel, painting the obsidian towers in shades of blood and shadow, beautiful in a harsh, unforgiving way, like everything else he'd built. 5 days until the healer arrived. 49 days until the eclipse. And somewhere in the darkness, an enemy he couldn't see was counting down the hours until everything collapsed. Elyra Vale was grinding dried valerian root when she heard the horses. The sound came up the mountain path like distant thunder, hooves against frozen stone, the crack of leather and metal that meant soldiers trained to move as a single unit. She stopped mid-motion with the pestle still pressed into the mortar. Her guardian looked up from the table where she was sorting medicinal herbs into clay jars. The old woman's hands never stopped moving, but her eyes went sharp and focused. Company, she said quietly. That was all. No panic, no fear. Just acknowledgement that something was coming and they would deal with it the way they dealt with everything else, by surviving. Elyra set down the pestle and walked to the window. Through the fog, she could see them. 8 riders wearing the crimson and black of the Iron Throne. The lead horse carried a banner she recognized from stories whispered around mountain fires. The king's crest, a wolf's head circled by a crown of thorns. Her pulse kicked up, but she kept her breathing steady. Panic was a luxury she couldn't afford. Not up here where the nearest settlement was 3 days' ride through terrain that killed travelers who didn't know how to listen to the mountain. What do you think they want? Elyra asked. The old woman finally stopped sorting herbs. Her weathered face showed nothing, but there was something in her eyes that looked almost like resignation. You, child. The word hung in the air between them. Elyra had always known this moment would come. 16 years hiding in the mountains. 16 years learning to heal wounds and speak to wolves and pretend she was just another orphan saved from tragedy instead of what she actually was. The last living piece of something powerful enough to make kings nervous. She crossed to the table and began wrapping the valerian root in cloth. Her hands moved automatically. Muscle memory from years of preparing herbs while her mind worked through problems that didn't have easy answers. The old woman watched her with eyes that had seen too much. You don't have to go with them. Yes, I do. Why? Because if soldiers from the Iron Throne came all the way up here, it means someone important is desperate. And desperate people make dangerous decisions. The old woman's mouth tightened into a thin line. So you'll walk into the lion's den because refusing might make things worse. Elyra looked up. Isn't that what you taught me? Survival isn't about being brave. It's about calculating which risks are worth taking. I taught you to survive, the old woman said, not to sacrifice yourself for people who wouldn't do the same for you. Maybe they wouldn't. But hiding up here won't change what I am, won't make me safer. Eventually, someone would come. At least this way I control the timing. The old woman stood and crossed to where Elyra was packing. She placed both hands on the girl's shoulders, firm enough to demand attention. Listen to me. The people down there in that empire of stone and blood, they don't think like us. They see everything as a resource, as something to use. If you go with them, you become a tool, and tools get discarded when they're no longer useful. Elyra met her gaze. Then I'll make sure I stay useful. The knock came before the old woman could respond. 3 sharp raps against wood. Official. Impatient. Elyra walked to the door and opened it before her guardian could stop her. The captain stood on the threshold. He was maybe 40, with a scar running from his left eye to his jaw, and the kind of posture that came from a lifetime of following orders without question. Behind him, 7 soldiers stood in formation, hands near weapons, eyes scanning the cottage interior like they were cataloging threats. Elyra Vale, the captain said. Not a question. Yes. His eyes swept over her, taking inventory. Mountain clothes patched and repatched, hands stained with herbs, hair tangled from wind. Nothing about her appearance said valuable or important or worth the king's attention, but he'd ridden 3 days through frozen mountains to find her anyway. You're summoned to Blackthorn Citadel, he said, by order of King Draven Caelthorn. Summoned, not invited, not requested. Summoned like property. Elyra felt the wolf inside her stir. That old dangerous thing that lived in her blood and wanted to bare teeth at anyone who thought they could command her. She pushed it down. Losing control now would only prove she was exactly what they feared. Why? She asked. The captain's expression didn't change. I don't question the king's orders. Neither should you. Her guardian appeared in the doorway beside her. The old woman looked small and fragile, but there was steel in her voice when she spoke. The girl stays here. The captain's hand moved to his sword. Not a threat yet, just a reminder that he had options, and none of them involved negotiation. With respect, this isn't a request. The old woman stepped forward. Elyra had seen her face down wolves twice her size with nothing but presence and will. She does not belong to your king. No one belongs to this king, the captain said quietly, but everyone serves the throne. That's what keeps the empire from tearing itself apart. He looked back at Elyra, and something in his face softened just slightly. Your Majesty is dying. The healers have failed. You're the last option before the succession wars begin, and half the kingdom burns. Elyra felt her stomach drop. The king was dying, which meant every ambitious noble in the empire was already sharpening knives and building alliances and calculating exactly how much blood they'd need to spill to claim the throne. The captain continued, If you refuse, I have orders to bring you anyway. I'd prefer not to do that. The threat was delivered so politely it almost didn't sound like a threat, but Elyra heard it clearly enough. She could run, disappear into the mountains where soldiers couldn't follow, live the rest of her life hiding from an empire that wanted to use her for something she barely understood, Or she could walk into the center of power and find out exactly what she was capable of. Her guardian's hand closed around her wrist, tight enough to hurt. "Don't do this," the old woman whispered. "You don't know what they'll do to you." Elyra met her eyes. "I know what happens if the empire collapses. The wars, the famines, the wolf clans turning on each other until there's nothing left but ash." She pulled her wrist free gently. The old woman's face crumpled. "After everything I did to keep you safe, after 16 years hiding you from the people who killed your parents, you're going to walk straight into their hands." Elyra felt the words like a knife. She'd always known her parents were dead, killed during some purge she was too young to remember. But hearing it said out loud made it real in a way it hadn't been before. "The Empire killed my parents," she said quietly. The old woman nodded. "The king's father ordered it. But it was the current king who made sure the job was finished. Every last member of the First Bloodline hunted down and eliminated. You only survived because I got to you first." The information settled over Elyra like ice water. King Draven Caelthorn, the man who summoned her, the man who needed her help, was the same man who destroyed her family. She looked at the captain. "Does he know who I am?" The captain's expression remained neutral. "He knows you carry the old blood. That's all that matters." Elyra turned back to her guardian. The old woman's eyes were wet, but no tears fell. Mountain people didn't cry, not where others could see. "If I don't go," Elyra said, "they'll come back, with more soldiers, and they won't leave until they get what they want. At least this way you stay safe." The old woman grabbed her face with both hands, forced her to maintain eye contact. "You listen to me. That king is a killer. He built his throne on the bones of your ancestors. If you walk into that citadel, you might never walk out." "I know. Then why?" "Because someone has to stop the cycle. Someone has to be smart enough to see past revenge and look at what happens if the empire falls apart. You taught me to survive. This is me surviving." The old woman stared at her for a long moment. Then she pulled Elyra into a fierce embrace. When she spoke again, her voice was rough. "You have your mother's stubbornness and your father's inability to walk away from a fight." Elyra held on tight. "Then I'll honor them by staying alive." She pulled back and looked at the captain. "I need 10 minutes to pack." He nodded. "You have 5, typical." Elyra gathered what she needed. Herbs, medical supplies, a knife her guardian had given her years ago with a handle wrapped in worn leather, clothes that might not embarrass her in front of nobles who wore silk and judged everyone by appearances. The old woman pressed a small leather pouch into her hands, wolfsbane and silverleaf. "If things go wrong and you need to defend yourself, against wolves or humans, both." Elyra tucked the pouch into her pack. "Thank you for everything." The old woman's jaw tightened. "Don't thank me yet. Thank me when you come back alive." Elyra walked to the door where the captain waited. She didn't look back. Looking back made leaving harder, and she needed to be hard right now. The soldiers formed up around her immediately, a moving cage of steel and discipline. As they rode down this mountain path, Elyra felt the cottage disappear behind fog and distance. The only home she'd ever known. The only safety she'd ever had. Gone. She was riding toward the heart of an empire built on the graves of her family, toward a king who needed her to save his life after he'd spent years making sure she had no life to save. The irony was almost funny. Almost. One of the soldiers rode up beside her, younger than the others, maybe mid-20s with nervous eyes that kept darting to her like she might do something unexpected. "Is it true?" he asked quietly. "That you can talk to wolves?" Elyra glanced at him. The captain had said not to engage, but the kid looked genuinely curious rather than hostile. "I can hear them," she said. "Whether that counts as talking depends on if they want to listen." The soldier nodded slowly. "I heard stories about people like you, the old blood. My grandmother used to say you could control entire packs, make them do whatever you wanted. That's not how it works. I don't control anything. I just understand them better than most." The captain turned in his saddle. "Brentwood, ride in formation." The young soldier fell back immediately. Elyra rode in silence after that, watching the landscape change as they descended. The mountain gave way to forests, then farmland, then villages built around keeps where families lived behind walls. This was the empire. Order maintained through fear, Peace built on the constant threat of violence. People surviving because they'd learned to obey before they learned to question. On the second day, they passed through a town large enough to have a market square.
Elyra watched people move through their lives.
Merchants selling grain, blacksmiths pounding metal, children running between stalls while their mothers shouted warnings. Normal, except for the gallows standing in the center of the square. 3 bodies hung from ropes, crows picking at faces, a sign nailed to the platform reading, "Treason," in letters big enough to read from a distance. The captain didn't slow down, neither did the soldiers. Like corpses displayed in public squares were just part of the landscape. Elyra forced herself to keep looking, to not turn away. Because this was the empire she was trying to save, this brutality disguised as justice, this violence dressed up as necessary order. That night, they made camp in a clearing surrounded by trees that blocked out the stars. The soldiers set up a perimeter, posted guards, moved with the kind of efficiency that came from doing the same thing 100 times. Elyra sat near the fire and felt eyes on her constantly. She wasn't a guest. She was cargo. Valuable enough to protect, but not valuable enough to trust. The captain approached with a plate of food. Dried meat and bread that looked like it had been designed to keep you alive without giving you any reason to enjoy it. "Eat," he said. "We ride hard tomorrow." Elyra took the plate. "Why is the king dying?" The captain's expression didn't change. "I don't have that information, but you have suspicions. Everyone has suspicions. Most of them are wrong." He started to walk away. Elyra spoke before he could get too far. "You said the healers failed. How many have tried?" The captain stopped, turned back. 17. Physicians, herbalists, mystics, all of them failed to even identify what was killing him. "And you think I'll succeed where they didn't? I think you're the last option. Whether you succeed or not doesn't change the fact that we're out of alternatives." He walked away after that, leaving Elyra alone with food she didn't want and questions that didn't have answers. She ate anyway. Survival meant keeping your strength up even when everything felt hopeless. After the meal, she walked to the edge of camp, close enough to the tree line to feel the forest pressing in, far enough from the fire that the soldiers couldn't hear. She closed her eyes and reached out with the part of her that wasn't entirely human. The wolves were there. She could feel them in the darkness. Wild ones, unbound by the hierarchy that controlled the Empire's shifter clans. They watched the camp with eyes that glowed and thoughts that brushed against her mind like whispers. Strangers, intruders, prey. She pushed back gently. Not prey, just passing through. The wolves didn't attack, but they didn't leave either. They followed at a distance, curious, cautious, waiting to see if she was worth protecting or worth eating. On the 4th night, one of them came closer. A massive gray female with scars across her muzzle and eyes that looked older than her body. She sat at the edge of the firelight and stared at Elyra with an intensity that felt like judgment. "Why do you go with them?" the wolf's thoughts whispered. Elyra glanced at the soldiers. They were too far away to hear. She focused on the wolf and thought the words instead of speaking them. "Because someone is dying." The wolf tilted her head. "Kings die. New kings rise. This is the way of packs. Not if the empire tears itself apart first." The wolf's ears flattened slightly. "Empires are built on blood. Let them drown in it." Elyra felt the weight of that truth settle over her. The wolf wasn't wrong. The empire had been built by conquering wild packs and forcing them into submission, by taking land that didn't belong to them and calling it progress. But letting it collapse wouldn't fix anything. It would just create more violence. "You sound like them," the wolf said. "The ones who believe order matters more than freedom." "Order keeps people alive," Elyra thought back. "Freedom without survival is just a pretty word for chaos." The wolf stood and turned away. "You smell like the old blood," she said. "Be careful. The old blood always draws hunters." Then she vanished into the darkness, and Elyra was alone again with the firelight and the soldiers who thought she was just a strange mountain girl instead of something ancient waking up. She didn't sleep that night. Couldn't. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw gallows, corpses, the bodies of people executed for crimes that might have been real or might have been convenient. This was the empire she was riding toward, built on fear and violence and the bones of everyone who refused to kneel, and the man at the center of it all was dying, which meant she had a choice: save him and preserve the brutal order he'd built, or let him die and watch millions suffer in the chaos that followed. Neither option felt right, but survival was rarely about choosing what felt right. It was about choosing what kept you breathing long enough to fight another day. On the 5th day, Blackthorn Citadel appeared on the horizon. Elyra had heard stories about the fortress, descriptions that made it sound like a monument to dominance carved from stone and ambition. But seeing it in person was different. The citadel rose from the landscape like something built to survive the end of the world. Obsidian towers sharp enough to cut the sky, walls thick enough to stop armies, courtyards visible even from a distance filled with soldiers training in formations that looked like choreographed violence. Everything about the structure was designed to send a message. This is what power looks like. This is what happens when you refuse to kneel. This is where the Empire's heart beats, and if you threaten it, you die. Elyra felt small riding through the gates. Not weak, just aware of how many people had died to build something this massive. The captain led her through corridors lined with tapestries showing historical victories, battles won, enemies crushed, kings standing over defeated armies with expressions that looked more like exhaustion than triumph. No one smiled in these tapestries. Winning apparently didn't make you happy. It just made you the target for the next person who wanted what you had. Servants moved through the halls like ghosts, heads down, eyes averted. The kind of people who'd learned that invisibility was safer than being noticed. Guards stood at every intersection, watching everything, hands near weapons. This wasn't a palace, it was a fortress pretending to be civilized. They stopped outside a set of doors carved with wolves in various stages of transformation. Human to beast, beast to human, the cycle that defined everyone who carried the blood. The captain knocked twice. A voice answered from inside. Deep, rough. The kind of voice that came from someone who spent more time giving orders than asking questions. Enter. The doors opened. The king's personal chamber was smaller than Elyra expected. No throne, no crowds of advisors, just a stone room with a fireplace and weapons mounted on the walls, and a man standing by the window who looked like he was holding himself together through pure stubborn refusal to break. Draven Caelthorn turned to face her. He was younger than she thought. Maybe early 30s, tall with shoulders built from combat and hands that looked like they'd broken bones and signed execution orders in the same afternoon. His face was carved with the kind of harsh angles that came from making terrible choices and living with them. But it was his eyes that stopped her, gray like winter storms, exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. He looked at her the way a man looks at his last option before accepting defeat. "You're the healer," he said. "Not a question." Elyra straightened her spine. "I am." Draven studied her for a long moment, taking inventory the same way his captain had, looking for something that justified dragging her down from the mountains. Whatever he saw didn't seem to reassure him. He gestured toward a chair near the fire. "Sit." She sat. He remained standing, control through positioning, a subtle reminder that this was his territory, and she existed here because he allowed it. "I'm dying," he said bluntly. "Every healer in the kingdom has failed to stop it. Lord Malric believes you have abilities they don't." Elyra kept her expression neutral. "What makes you think I can help?" "Because you're still alive." The words landed like a blade. Draven walked closer. Not threatening, just closing the distance between them until she could see the fine tremor in his hands that he was working very hard to hide. "The curse killing me was designed to destroy anyone with the old bloodline," he continued. "The original wolves, the ones who ruled before the Empire existed. You carry that blood. I can smell it on you." Elyra's pulse kicked up. "How do you know what I carry?" "Because I've spent 16 years hunting down every last member of your family and making sure they couldn't threaten my throne." The confession came out matter of fact. No apology, no justification, just the truth delivered by a man who'd made peace with being a monster a long time ago. Elyra felt the wolf inside her snarl, that old rage that lived in her bones and wanted to tear into him for admitting he'd slaughtered her bloodline like they were nothing more than obstacles. She forced it down, barely. Her hands gripped the arms of the chair hard enough to make her knuckles white. "Then why am I here?" she said quietly. Why bring me to your fortress after spending years making sure people like me didn't exist? Draven's expression didn't change. Because I made a mistake. I thought eliminating the old blood would stabilize the Empire. Instead, it made me vulnerable to something I didn't see coming. He sat down across from her and she saw it clearly now. The sickness eating him from the inside. The way his skin looked too tight over his bones. The shadows under his eyes that came from fighting a war against his own body. This curse was designed to kill me, he said. But it won't stop there. The moment I die, every noble house in the kingdom will start tearing each other apart for the throne. Millions will die in the succession wars. The empire will fracture into territories ruled by whoever's brutal enough to hold them. He leaned forward, and his eyes locked onto hers with an intensity that felt like being pinned. So here's the situation. You can help me survive and keep the empire stable, or you can let me die and watch everything burn. Elyra stared at him. At this man who'd destroyed her family and built a kingdom on violence and was now asking her to save his life. You killed my parents, she said. Yes. You hunted my entire bloodline to extinction. Yes. And now you expect me to save you. Draven's jaw tightened. I don't expect anything, but I'm asking anyway. Because the alternative is worse than whatever revenge you're imagining. The wolf in her blood wanted to walk away. Let him suffer the way her parents suffered. Watch him die knowing she could have stopped it. But the human part of her saw something else. She saw the exhaustion of a man who'd been carrying an impossible weight for too long. The resignation of someone who knew exactly how many terrible things he'd done and couldn't undo any of them. And she saw the truth he wasn't saying out loud. He wasn't afraid of dying. He was afraid of what his death would do to everyone else. What do you need from me? She asked. Draven exhaled slowly, like he'd been holding his breath waiting for her to refuse. Touch me. Feel the curse. Tell me if it can be broken. Elyra stood and walked to where he sat. Up close she could see the fine scars covering his hands, the calluses from holding weapons, the faint tremor that ran through his entire body like he was barely holding himself together. She reached out and pressed her palm against his chest. The curse hit her like a wave of ice water. It wasn't just sickness. It was something alive, breathing, aware. It wrapped around his heart like thorns and dug into his lungs and whispered things in a language older than words. She gasped and tried to pull back, but Draven's hand closed over hers, keeping her there. What do you feel? He asked quietly. Elyra fought to focus through the sensation of something dark and hungry crawling through her awareness. It's alive. It's feeding on your wolf, trying to destroy the bond between your human side and the beast. Can you break it? She pushed deeper into the curse, searching for weak points, fractures, anything that might respond to her abilities. And then she felt it. The curse recognized her. It knew what she was. It was waiting for her. Elyra ripped her hand away and stumbled backward, her heart hammering against her ribs, breath coming too fast. Draven stood immediately. What happened? She looked up at him and felt the weight of understanding settle over her like a shroud. This isn't just about you, she said. The curse was designed to destroy the old bloodline. All of it. Anyone who carries the original wolf blood. Draven went very still. You're saying, I'm saying whoever created this curse knew I existed. They knew you'd eventually come looking for someone like me. And the moment I touched you, it infected me too. The silence in the room felt like the air before a thunderstorm. Draven's jaw tightened. Then we're both dying. Elyra nodded slowly. The king who destroyed her family and the last survivor of the bloodline he slaughtered were now tied together by the same curse. If he died, she died. If she died, the empire died. And somewhere in the shadows, someone was watching and waiting for all of it to burn. Draven walked to the window and stared out at his kingdom. When he spoke again, his voice was flat, empty. 49 days until the eclipse. That's how long we have before the curse finishes what it started. Elyra felt the wolf inside her howl in rage and fear, and something that felt dangerously close to despair. She'd walked into this fortress thinking she might save a dying king. Now she realized she'd walked into a trap designed specifically to kill her, and the only way out was to save the man who murdered her family. Outside the window, storm clouds gathered over Blackthorn's citadel like a promise, and in the darkest corner of the chamber, something laughed.
Elyra pressed her back against the cold stone wall and tried to steady her breathing. The curse was inside her now. She could feel it moving through her veins like poison, slow, patient, waiting. Draven remained at the window with his shoulders rigid and his hands braced against the frame. The tremor in his fingers had gotten worse, more visible, like the confession of weakness had stripped away whatever discipline kept it hidden. "How long?" she asked. "Until what?" "Until you felt it." "The curse. When did it start?" He didn't turn around. 6 weeks ago. Started as fatigue, then pain. Then the wolf inside me began changing into something I couldn't control. What happened 6 weeks ago? I executed a traitor. Lord Osmond Grey. He was plotting to overthrow the throne with backing from 3 noble houses. I had him beheaded in the great hall in front of the entire court. Elyra felt her pulse quicken. "You think the curse came from him?" "No. Osmond was an ambitious fool. He didn't have the intelligence or resources to create something like this. But someone used his execution as cover, slipped the curse into me while everyone was focused on the spectacle. So you have enemies inside your own court." Draven finally turned to face her. His expression was carved from exhaustion and barely contained rage. "I have nothing but enemies. The nobles who bow are just waiting for me to show weakness. The generals who swear loyalty are calculating how much they'd gain from a coup. Even my own blood would put a knife in my back if they thought they could take the throne. Then why fight to keep it?" The question came out sharper than she intended. Draven's eyes narrowed. "Because the alternative is worse. You saw the towns on your way here. The gallows, the order. That doesn't exist without someone willing to enforce it. The moment I'm gone, every petty lord with an army will carve out territory. Villages will burn. Families will starve. The weak will die first, and the strong will fight over the scraps. So you're a monster to prevent other monsters from taking over. I'm a monster who understands that empires don't run on hope. They run on fear and discipline and the absolute certainty that defiance has consequences." He crossed to the table and poured 2 glasses of something dark, handed one to her. "Drink. You're going to need it." Elyra took the glass but didn't drink. "What happens now?" "Now we figure out who cursed us and how to break it before the eclipse. 49 days, that's all we have. And if we fail, then we both die and the empire collapses into civil war. Millions dead, territories fractured, centuries of progress burned away in a matter of months." Elyra stared at the liquid in her glass. It looked like blood in the firelight. She thought about her parents, about the old woman in the mountains who saved her, about 16 years spent hiding from an empire that wanted her dead. And now that same empire needed her to survive. The irony was suffocating. "I need access to your archives," she said. "Old texts, records about the First Bloodline, anything that might explain how this curse was constructed." Draven nodded. "You'll have it. I'll also assign you chambers in the royal wing, close enough that I can reach you quickly if the curse escalates." "I don't need royal chambers." "Yes, you do. The moment the court sees you staying in servant quarters, they'll assume you're not important. And people who aren't important get ignored or eliminated. You need to look valuable enough that killing you would be a political risk. So I'm bait. You're an asset. There's a difference." Elyra finally drank. The liquid burned going down. Some kind of whiskey that tasted like smoke and regret. "One more thing," Draven said. "Don't trust anyone in this citadel. Not the servants, not the guards, especially not the nobles. Everyone here has an agenda and most of them involve dead kings. What about you?" His mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "I'm the person who killed your family. Trust me least of all." The honesty was almost refreshing. "Almost." Elyra set down the glass. "I want to know their names. My parents. You hunted them down. You must have records." Draven's expression shifted. Something that looked like discomfort crossed his face before he locked it down. "Why?" "Because they died, and I don't even know who they were. I deserve that much." He walked to a cabinet and pulled out a leather-bound journal, flipped through pages covered in neat handwriting, stopped on one and stared at it for a long moment. Then he closed the journal and met her eyes. "Marin and Torin Vale. Your mother was a healer like you. Your father was a scholar. They lived quietly in the southern territories. No political ambitions, no threats to the throne. Then why kill them?"
Because my father believed the old blood would eventually rise up, that it was only a matter of time before someone with First Bloodline started gathering followers and challenging the Empire. So he ordered them eliminated. All of them. And you carried out the order. No. I was 17 when my father died, but I inherited his policies. When I took the throne, I made sure the job was finished. Every last member of the First Bloodline, hunted down and executed. He set the journal on the table between them. Your parents died because they represented a future threat, not because of anything they did, just because of what they were. Elyra felt her hands curl into fists. How many? What? How many people did you kill because of what they were instead of what they'd done? Draven didn't look away. 43 adults, 12 children. The number sat between them like a corpse. Elyra wanted to scream, to attack, to let the wolf inside her tear into him until he understood what it felt like to lose everything. But rage wouldn't save her life. And her life was tied to his now, whether she wanted it or not. I hope it was worth it, she said quietly. It wasn't. The admission came out so flat it took her a moment to process. Draven walked back to the window. Then why do it? Because I thought it would make the Empire safer. I thought eliminating potential threats before they became real threats was the logical choice. I was wrong. You don't get to be wrong about murdering children. No, I don't. But being right or wrong doesn't change the fact that it happened, and it doesn't change the fact that we're both dying unless we find a way to break this curse. He turned to face her fully. So you can hate me. You can spend every moment planning revenge. Or you can help me save both our lives and then decide if killing me is worth dying for. Elyra met his eyes and saw something she didn't expect. Guilt. Not regret. Regret implied you wished you could undo the past. Guilt meant you knew exactly what you'd done and had to live with it anyway. The difference mattered. Show me to my chambers, she said. I need to think. Mush. The royal wing was exactly what she expected. Excessive. Her chambers were larger than the entire cottage she'd grown up in. Stone walls covered with tapestries showing forests and mountains. A bed big enough for 4 people. Windows that overlooked courtyards where soldiers trained in formations that looked like violence disguised as discipline. A servant appeared within minutes of her arrival. Young, maybe 19. Eyes that darted everywhere except directly at Elyra. I'm here to assist you, my lady. Whatever you need. I'm not a lady. The servant bowed anyway. His Majesty has instructed that you be given anything you require. Food, clothing, access to the archives. Elyra studied the girl. What's your name? Mara. How long have you worked here, Mara? 3 years. Do you like it? The question seemed to catch her off guard. Mara's eyes widened slightly. I serve the throne, my lady. That's all that matters. Translation. No. Elyra gestured toward the door. You can go. I'll call if I need anything. Mara hesitated. His Majesty also instructed that you not leave these chambers without an escort. For your safety. For my safety, or to make sure I don't run. Both, I imagine. At least she was honest. After Mara left, Elyra explored the chambers, checked the windows, tested the door, looked for hidden passages or ways someone could enter without her noticing. Nothing obvious. But that didn't mean they weren't there. She sat on the edge of the massive bed and felt the exhaustion hit her all at once. 5 days of riding. The confrontation with Draven, the curse now living inside her veins like a countdown to death. She closed her eyes and reached for the wolf. It was there, coiled in her chest, angry, restless. It wanted to break free and tear into everything that threatened her. But breaking free wouldn't help. Not here. Not surrounded by soldiers and nobles who would see her wolf as proof she was dangerous. So she pushed it down, locked it away, buried it beneath the kind of control that came from 16 years of hiding what she was. A knock came at the door. Elyra opened her eyes. Come in. Lord Malric Voss entered like he owned the space. Tall, elegant, dressed in black velvet that probably cost more than most families made in a year. His eyes were the color of winter ice and just as warm. Miss Vale, he said smoothly, I wanted to introduce myself properly. I'm Lord Malric, the king's advisor. Elyra stood. I know who you are. Malric's smile didn't reach his eyes. Then you have me at a disadvantage. I know very little about you. Other than the fact that you carry blood my cousin has spent considerable effort trying to eliminate.
Your cousin made that very clear. I'm sure he did. Draven has many qualities, but subtlety isn't one of them. Malric circled the room slowly, looking at everything, taking inventory. His movements were too controlled, too deliberate, like every gesture was calculated for maximum effect. I'm curious, he continued. What convinced you to help him? After everything he's done to your bloodline, self-preservation. If he dies, I die. The curse made sure of that. Ah, yes. The curse. Fascinating piece of magical engineering. Whoever designed it understood the old bloodlines better than anyone alive. You sound impressed. I'm always impressed by intelligence, even when it's being used against me. He stopped by the window and looked out at the citadel. Tell me something, Miss Vale. Do you believe my cousin deserves to be saved? Elyra walked closer, careful not to get within arm's reach. What I believe doesn't matter. What matters is whether millions of people deserve to die in the succession wars. Malric turned to face her, very pragmatic. But she didn't answer the question. No, I don't think he deserves to be saved. But the Empire isn't just him. It's everyone who'll suffer if it collapses. Malric's smile widened. You're smarter than I expected. Most healers are soft, guided by compassion instead of logic. But you see the bigger picture. Is there a reason you're here, Lord Malric? Or are you just assessing the new asset? Both. He crossed to the door, paused with his hand on the frame. One piece of advice, Miss Vale. Don't let Draven convince you he's the only thing holding this empire together. Kings are replaceable. The throne endures regardless of who sits on it. Then why hasn't someone replaced him already? Because no one has managed to kill him yet. But that's a problem time tends to solve. He left without another word. Elyra stood in the silence and felt the weight of understanding settle over her. Lord Malric wasn't just the king's advisor. He was a rival, and rivals didn't give helpful advice unless it served their interests. She walked to the window and looked out at the citadel, at the soldiers training, the nobles moving through courtyards like predators circling prey. This place was a nest of vipers, and she'd just been dropped into the center of it. The archives were located 3 levels below the main citadel. Stone corridors lit by torches that cast shadows that moved wrong. The air smelled like old parchment and secrets buried so deep they'd forgotten how to breathe. A scholar met her at the entrance. Ancient, maybe 70, with eyes that looked like they'd read every book ever written and found them all disappointing. I'm Master Corvin, he said, keeper of records. His Majesty sent word you'd be requiring access to restricted materials. Anything related to the First Bloodline. Curses. Old magic. Anything that predates the Empire. Corvin's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. That's considerable ground to cover. Then I'll be here a while. He led her through rows of shelves stacked with texts bound in leather and metal. Some of the books looked older than the citadel itself, pages brittle enough to crumble if you breathed on them wrong. The First Bloodline materials are kept separately, Corvin said. Most of it was supposed to be destroyed, but I found that destroying knowledge is wasteful, so I preserved what I could. Why? Because history doesn't care what we think about it. It simply is. And pretending the past didn't exist doesn't make us safer. It makes us ignorant. He stopped at a locked cabinet and produced a key that looked like it had been forged during a different age. Inside were texts Elyra recognized from descriptions her guardian had whispered. The Codex of First Wolves, Bloodline Chronicles, Grimoire of Ancient Bonds, books that were supposed to be myths. Corvin pulled out the codex and set it on a reading table. This is the most comprehensive record we have, written by the original pacts before they fractured into clans. Elyra opened the cover carefully. The pages were covered in script so old she had to squint to make out the words, but she could read it, because the old blood remembered. The first wolves were not shifters in the way we understand now, the text began. They were something older, something that existed between human consciousness and animal instinct. They could hear the thoughts of all wolves, command entire packs through will alone. Their magic was tied to blood and bone and the cycles of the moon. Elyra turned pages, reading fragments about rituals, bonding ceremonies, the way power passed through bloodlines like inherited memories. Then she found the section on curses. To curse the first blood is to curse the earth itself. Such magic requires sacrifice of equal weight, a life for a life, blood for blood. And the knowledge of names lost to time. She stopped. Read it again. The knowledge of names lost to time. Someone had known the true names of the First Bloodline, the names that connected them to the original magic, and they'd used that knowledge to construct a curse specifically designed to destroy anyone who carried it. Master Corvin appeared beside her. Found something. Maybe. This talks about names, true names. What does that mean? The scholar adjusted his spectacles. The first wolves believed names held power, not the names given at birth, but the names that connected you to your bloodline, your ancestors, the original packs. How would someone learn those names? By studying the bloodlines for years, by tracking families, by understanding the connections between past and present. Elyra felt her stomach drop. Someone had spent years researching her family, learning their true names, building a curse designed specifically to kill them. This wasn't random. This was personal. Who has access to these archives? She asked. Corvin's expression tightened. Only a few. The king, Lord Malric, senior scholars. Anyone else requires explicit permission. Has Lord Malric been here recently? He's here often. He has a fascination with history. Elyra closed the book carefully. I need copies of everything, especially anything related to curse construction and bloodline magic. That will take time. Then start now. Corvin nodded and disappeared into the stacks. Elyra sat alone with the codex and felt pieces of the puzzle start connecting. Lord Malric had access to the knowledge needed to build this curse. Lord Malric had been watching her for years, according to what he told Draven. Lord Malric stood to gain everything if the king died. But proof was different than suspicion, and accusing the king's advisor without evidence was a fast way to end up executed for treason. She needed more. The door to the archives opened. Elyra looked up, expecting Corvin. Instead, she saw a young man, maybe her age, dressed in scholar's robes, carrying a stack of books that looked ready to topple. He saw her and froze. Oh, I didn't know anyone else was down here. Elyra studied him. He had nervous energy, eyes that moved too fast, the kind of person who lived in books because real life was too complicated. I'm researching for the king, she said. The young man set down his books carefully. You're the healer from the mountains. Everyone's talking about you. Are they? You're either going to save His Majesty or you're a spy sent to finish him off. Opinions are divided. What do you think? I think if you were a spy, you wouldn't be sitting in the archives reading old texts. You'd be doing something more direct. Fair point. He extended his hand. I'm Finn, junior scholar. I mostly organize things and try not to set anything on fire. Elyra shook his hand. Setting things on fire is a concern. You'd be surprised how flammable ancient parchment is. I learned that the hard way. Despite everything, she felt her mouth curve slightly. You work for Master Corvin. More like I work around him. He tolerates my presence because I'm useful occasionally. Finn pulled up a chair without asking. So what are you researching? Curses. The First Bloodline. Magic that predates the Empire. Heavy topics. Any particular reason? I'm trying not to die. Finn nodded like that made perfect sense. The curse. Right. Everyone knows His Majesty is sick, but no one's allowed to talk about it. Official position is he's just exhausted from running the Empire. What's the unofficial position? That he's dying and whoever takes the throne next is going to burn half the kingdom to claim it. Elyra looked at him carefully. You're very honest for someone who works in a royal court. I'm very bad at lying. It's why I'll never be important. Important people lie constantly. He pulled one of his books closer. What do you know about blood magic? Not as much as I need to. Then you're in luck. I've been cataloging texts on magical theory for the past year. Blood magic is surprisingly well documented if you know where to look. Show me. Finn opened the book and started pointing to passages. Blood magic requires a connection. You can't curse someone at random. You need something that links you to them. Hair, bone. A true name. The stronger the connection, the more powerful the curse. So whoever cursed the king had access to something personal. Or they had access to someone who did. Elyra thought about that. Lord Malric. Always close to the king. Always in position to collect the kind of personal items needed for blood magic. Finn continued. The interesting thing about blood curses is they're designed to spread.
like a disease. Once the primary target is infected, anyone who shares similar blood becomes vulnerable, which explains why I'm infected too. Exactly. You carry the same bloodline markers. The curse recognized you the moment you touched His Majesty. Can it be broken? Finn flipped through pages. Theoretically, yes, but you'd need to either kill the person who cast it or find a way to sever the blood connection. How do you sever a blood connection? The text doesn't say. Most of these rituals were lost when the first wolves were hunted down. Elyra felt frustration building. So we're looking for information that was deliberately destroyed. Welcome to historical research. Half of what we know is incomplete, and the other half is probably wrong. Master Corvin returned carrying a stack of copied pages. These are the relevant sections. I've marked passages that reference curse breaking and bloodline severance. He set them down and looked at Finn. Shouldn't you be cataloging the Eastern Wing? I finished early. Impossible. That's 2 weeks of work. I'm very motivated. Corvin's expression suggested he didn't believe that but wasn't going to argue. He turned to Elyra. I'll continue making copies. Return whenever you need more materials. Thank you. After Corvin left, Finn leaned closer. He likes you. He doesn't help most people this much. Why is he helping me? Because Corvin believes knowledge should be used to solve problems. And you're trying to solve a very big problem. Elyra gathered the copied pages. I need to get back, study these. Finn stood. If you need help translating anything or finding more sources, I'm usually here, mostly because I don't have anywhere else to be. She paused at the door. Why are you being helpful? Because if the king dies, this place burns, and I like these archives. I'd prefer they didn't turn into ash. At least he was honest about his motivations. Elyra left the archives with more questions than answers, but she had direction now. Someone close to the king had built this curse, someone with access to personal items and ancient knowledge, and she had 48 days left to prove it. Dinner that night was a test she hadn't prepared for. A servant arrived at her chambers with a message. His Majesty requests your presence at the evening meal. The Great Hall, formal dress required. Elyra stared at the gown that had been delivered with the message. Deep green silk. Too elegant. Too expensive. Too much like armor disguised as beauty. She put it on anyway. Because refusing would signal weakness, and weakness in this court got you killed. The Great Hall was exactly what nightmares were made of. Massive. Stone pillars rising to vaulted ceilings. Tables arranged in a hierarchy that put the king at the highest point and everyone else scrambling for position below. Nobles dressed in colors that screamed wealth, jewels that caught firelight, faces that smiled while eyes calculated exactly how to use you. Elyra entered and felt every conversation stop. All eyes turned to her. The mountain girl. The healer. The last of a bloodline the king had spent years destroying. Walking into the center of power wearing silk and pretending she belonged. A servant led her to a seat near the king's table, close enough to signal importance, far enough to remind her she wasn't equal. Draven sat at the head wearing black that made him look like a king carved from shadow. Lord Malric sat to his right. Other nobles filled the surrounding seats. Draven's eyes met hers across the room. No expression, just acknowledgement. She sat. A woman beside her leaned over immediately, dripping with jewels and malice. You must be the healer everyone's whispering about. Elyra kept her voice neutral. I am. How rustic. I'm Lady Cressida, House Morven. We control the Western Territories. Congratulations. Lady Cressida's smile sharpened. Tell me, is it true you can speak to wolves? The wild ones. I can hear them. How fascinating. And do they speak back? Sometimes. What do they say? That humans ask too many questions. The table around them went silent. Then someone laughed. A man further down. Built like a soldier, scarred hands wrapped around a wine glass. I like her, he said. Most people are too polite to insult Lady Cressida to her face. Lady Cressida's expression froze. Lord Garrett, how delightful to hear from you. Garrett raised his glass toward Elyra. Welcome to the Viper Pit, mountain girl. Try not to get bitten your first night. Draven's voice cut through the noise. Enough. The word was quiet, but it carried weight. Everyone stopped talking immediately. Miss Vale is a guest, Draven continued. She will be treated with respect. Anyone who forgets that can leave. The threat was delivered calmly, which made it more effective. Lady Cressida's smile became brittle. Of course, Your Majesty. I meant no offense. The meal began. Servants brought course after course, food that looked more like art than sustenance. Elyra ate mechanically while conversation swirled around her. Politics disguised as small talk. Alliances formed and broken between servings. Everyone performing for the king while plotting behind his back. Halfway through the meal, Lord Malric leaned across the table. Tell me, Miss Vale, have you made progress in your research? Some. The archives are extensive. Indeed. My family has contributed many texts over the generations. We believe knowledge is the foundation of power. Elyra met his eyes. Is that why you spend so much time studying the First Bloodline? Malric's expression didn't change, but something flickered behind his gaze. History fascinates me, especially the parts we're taught to forget, like how the Empire was built on the bones of the people you tried to eliminate. The table went silent again. Draven's jaw tightened, but he didn't intervene. Malric smiled. Not eliminate. Integrate. The Empire absorbed the old families, gave them purpose within a larger structure. You mean you conquered them and forced them to obey? Semantics. The result is the same. Unity under a single throne. Elyra leaned forward slightly. And when that throne becomes unstable, what happens to your unity? Malric's eyes went cold. Then we find a new center. The Empire is larger than any one king. Draven set down his glass hard enough to crack the silence. Lord Malric, perhaps we should discuss succession plans after dinner. In private. Of course, Your Majesty. But the damage was done. Everyone at the table had heard Malric talk about replacing the king like it was inevitable, and everyone had seen Draven do nothing to stop him. After dinner, Draven caught her arm as she tried to leave. My chambers. Now. It wasn't a request. Tuck. She followed him through corridors empty except for guards who looked straight ahead and pretended not to see anything. His chambers were colder than she remembered, fire burning low, shadows thick in corners. Draven turned on her the moment the door closed. What were you thinking? I was thinking your cousin is planning to kill you. His cousin is always planning to kill me. That doesn't mean you provoke him in front of the entire court. Maybe someone needs to. Everyone at that table knows he's positioning himself to take the throne, and no one's doing anything about it, because accusing him without proof starts a civil war immediately. Is that what you want? I want to not die, and that means figuring out who cursed us before time runs out. Draven walked to the window, pressed both palms against the stone. You can't fight battles you can't win. Malric has half the noble houses backing him. If I move against him without evidence, they'll see it as tyranny, and tyrants get overthrown. So you just let him slowly poison your court. I let him think he's winning while I figure out how to destroy him without destroying the Empire in the process. He turned to face her. Politics isn't about being right. It's about surviving long enough to be right later. Elyra felt exhaustion wash over her. This is insane. You're dying. I'm dying. And we're playing games with people who want us both dead. Welcome to leadership. She laughed. It came out bitter. You really think this is worth saving? Draven crossed to where she stood. Got close enough that she could see the exhaustion carved into his face. The burden of holding everything together. No, he said quietly. But it's all I have. And letting it burn won't bring back your family or undo the terrible things I've done. So I fight, because the alternative is worse. They stood there, too close, both of them carrying curses and secrets and the weight of an empire balanced on knives. Elyra felt the wolf inside her stir, not in anger, in recognition, because Draven had a wolf too, and despite everything, they understood each other in ways no one else could. I found something in the archives, she said, about true names and blood connections. His eyes sharpened. Show me. She spread the copied pages across his war table, explained what Finn had told her, how blood magic required personal items, how curses spread through bloodline connections. Draven studied the texts. Who has access to these materials? Master Corvin, Lord Malric, senior scholars, anyone you gave explicit permission to. So Malric could have researched this for years, built the curse slowly, waited for the perfect moment to deploy it. That's my theory. It's a good theory. But theories don't hold up in court. We need proof. How do we get proof? We set a trap. Elyra looked at him. What kind of trap? The kind where we make Malric think he's won, let him get close enough to make a mistake. And when he does, we bury him. That's dangerous. Everything in this citadel is dangerous. At least this way we control the variables. He looked at her, and something shifted in his expression, something that looked almost like respect. You're not what I expected, he said. What did you expect? Someone fragile, easy to manipulate. Instead, I got someone who insults nobles at dinner and challenges me in front of my court. Is that a problem? No, it's refreshing. Most people are too terrified, to be honest. Maybe they have good reason. They do. But honesty is more useful than fear. Fear makes people loyal until someone scarier comes along. Honesty means you'll tell me when I'm wrong. Elyra met his eyes. You were wrong to kill my family. I know. The admission hung between them. Simple, direct, no justification, just the truth, and somehow that mattered more than any apology could. She gathered the papers. I should go, it's late. Draven walked her to the door, stopped before opening it. One more thing, the wolf inside you. How strong is it? Strong enough. Can you control it? Yes. Good. Because there's going to come a moment when control is the only thing keeping both of us alive. He opened the door. She walked out into corridors lit by torches that cast shadows too long to be natural. Behind her, she heard the door close. And somewhere in the darkness, someone was watching, waiting, counting down the days until the Empire burned. Elyra returned to her chambers and locked the door, pressed her back against the wood, and felt the curse pulse inside her veins. 48 days left. 48 days to break a curse designed by someone who understood the old magic better than anyone alive. 48 days to save a king she should hate. And somewhere in the Citadel, Lord Malric was planning his next move. She walked to the window and looked out at the obsidian towers rising against the night sky. This place was a trap, but she'd walked into it knowing exactly what it was. And now there was no way out except through blood and fire and whatever lay waiting in the Veilfang wastes. The wolf inside her howled, not in fear, in anticipation, because some battles couldn't be avoided, they could only be won. The wolf inside her howled, not in fear, in anticipation, because some battles couldn't be avoided, they could only be won. 3 days passed like waiting for an execution. Elyra spent her mornings in the archives, afternoons studying curse mechanics with Finn, evenings pretending to be comfortable at dinners where every noble smiled with knives hidden behind their backs. The curse was getting worse. She could feel it spreading through her veins like ice, slow, patient, methodical. Every morning she woke up weaker. Every night the wolf inside her grew more restless, more desperate to break free and tear into anything that threatened her survival. Draven was deteriorating faster. She saw it in the way his hand shook when he thought no one was watching, the way he gripped tables to stay upright, the way his eyes went distant during council meetings like he was fighting battles inside his own body. They were running out of time. 45 days until the eclipse. 45 days to break a curse designed by someone who understood blood magic better than anyone alive. The trap they'd planned was simple in theory. Let Lord Malric think Draven was weakening beyond recovery. Let him believe the succession was inevitable. Wait for him to make his move and then catch him with evidence solid enough to justify execution. But executing the king's advisor without absolute proof would fracture the noble houses. Half of them were already loyal to Malric. The other half were waiting to see which way power would shift. Politics in this empire wasn't about right or wrong. It was about convincing enough people that your version of events was the only version that mattered. And convincing required evidence. The thing about power at the highest level that nobody tells you is this. The people closest to the throne are the most dangerous. Not because they're the strongest, but because they know exactly where the weaknesses are. They've studied every vulnerability, memorized every pattern, waited years for the perfect moment to strike. Loyalty at the top isn't about devotion. It's about calculation. About weighing what you gain from supporting someone against what you'd gain from destroying them. And when the math changes, so does the loyalty. Draven understood this better than anyone. He'd built his reign on the assumption that everyone around him was a potential threat. That trust was a liability. That showing weakness invited challenges. But even he hadn't seen Malric coming. Because Malric had been patient, had played the role of trusted advisor so perfectly that even the most paranoid king in the empire had believed it. That was the real genius of the trap. Not the curse itself, but the decades of groundwork that made the curse possible. Elyra was in the archives when Finn found her. He looked pale, hands trembling slightly as he set down a leather-bound journal. "You need to see this." "What is it?" "A record. From 16 years ago. Kept by the former Master of Archives before Corvin took over." Elyra opened the journal. The handwriting was cramped and difficult to read, pages yellowed with age. Finn pointed to a specific entry. "There. Third paragraph." She read slowly. "Lord Malric Voss has requested access to restricted materials regarding the First Bloodline, specifically texts on blood magic and curse construction. His interest appears academic, but I have noted his requests for future reference. The king has granted permission. The date was from 3 months before her parents were killed." Elyra felt her stomach drop. Malric had been researching blood magic and the First Bloodline before the purge even began. "Keep reading," Finn said quietly. She turned the page. Another entry. 6 weeks later. "Lord Malric has returned multiple times. He has copied extensive sections regarding true names and bloodline connections. When questioned, he claims the research is for a historical treatise on pre-Empire magical practices. I remain unconvinced but lack authority to deny access granted by the throne." Elyra looked up. "This proves he was studying curse magic years before Draven was infected." Finn nodded. "But there's more. Look at the final entry." She flipped to the last page. The handwriting had changed, more erratic, urgent. "I have discovered discrepancies in the bloodline records. Several families marked as eliminated are missing confirmation of death. Either the execution orders were not carried out completely, or someone has been altering records. I have brought this to Lord Malric's attention as he oversees the census archives. He assured me he would investigate. I believe him to be trustworthy." That was the final entry. Elyra felt pieces clicking into place. The former Master of Archives had noticed that some First Bloodline families hadn't been completely eliminated. He'd told Malric. And then the entries stopped. "What happened to him?" she asked. "The former Master." Finn's expression was grim. "He died. 6 months after that last entry. Official cause was heart failure." "Official cause?" "Yes." Elyra closed the journal carefully. "Malric killed him. We can't prove that. He told the Master about incomplete records. The Master died. And Malric made sure those records stayed incomplete so he could use survivors later." Finn pushed his spectacles up. "Use them how?" Elyra stared at the journal. "By keeping me alive. He told Draven's father that the bloodline was too dangerous to let survive. Then he made sure the purge left just enough survivors that he could use them as tools later. But why? Because he knew eventually those survivors would be needed. And when they were, he'd be the only person who knew where to find them. It gave him leverage, control. The wolf inside her snarled with rage. Malric hadn't just cursed the king. He'd orchestrated her entire life, kept her alive like a weapon in storage, waited 16 years until the perfect moment to deploy her. This is what true manipulation looks like. Not the obvious kind where someone threatens you into compliance, but the invisible kind where your entire existence is shaped by decisions made before you were old enough to understand what was happening. Malric had turned her life into a tool, had made sure she survived specifically so she could be used, had calculated that eventually Draven would need the old blood, and when he did, Malric would be the hero who knew where to find it. Except the curse ensured that finding her would doom them both. She stood abruptly. "I need to show this to Draven." Finn grabbed her arm. "Wait. If you accuse Malric with just this, he'll say it proves nothing. That he was doing legitimate research. You need more. Then what do you suggest?" Finn hesitated. "There's a storage vault beneath the eastern tower, where they keep personal effects from executed traitors. If Malric used blood magic to curse the king, he would have needed something personal. Hair, blood, bone. Maybe he kept the components there. Why would he keep evidence? Because destroying magical components can backfire. If you break the wrong thing at the wrong time, the curse rebounds. It's safer to store them until the target is dead." Elyra felt her pulse quicken. "Can you get me into the vault? I can get you to the door. After that, you're on your own. It's heavily guarded. Then we go tonight. This is a terrible idea. Yes, but we're out of good ones. She spent the rest of the day preparing, studying the Citadel layout, memorizing guard rotations, planning exit routes in case everything went wrong, because everything probably would go wrong. That was the nature of plans built on desperation. They worked until they didn't, and when they failed, the consequences were usually fatal. But doing nothing meant dying slowly while Malric consolidated power. At least this way she was taking action. At least this way she was fighting back. Dinner that night was torture. Elyra sat at the high table pretending to eat, while Malric smiled from across the room. He knew something. She could see it in the way he watched her, the way his eyes tracked her every movement like a predator calculating the best moment to strike. Draven looked worse than she'd ever seen him. His face was drawn, skin stretched too tight over bones. He barely touched his food, barely spoke. Just sat there like a king carved from exhaustion and held together by sheer stubborn will. Lord Malric raised his glass. A toast. To His Majesty. May his strength endure. The court echoed the toast. Everyone drank. Elyra watched Malric's face and saw the smile that didn't reach his eyes. He was mocking them, celebrating a victory that hadn't happened yet but felt inevitable. After dinner, she caught Draven's arm. I need to tell you something. Not here. His chambers, then. He looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. They walked through corridors lined with guards who pretended not to see them, through doors that closed behind them with the finality of traps springing shut. Inside his chambers, Draven poured himself whiskey, didn't offer her any, just stood by the window and waited. Elyra told him about the journal, about Malric's research, about the vault and what she planned to do. When she finished, Draven was silent for a long time. You're going to break into a secured vault, he said finally, guarded by soldiers loyal to Malric, to steal evidence that might not exist. Yes, that's suicide. Probably. But it's the only move we have left. Draven turned to face her. His eyes were hard. If you get caught, I can't protect you. Malric will use it as proof you're a traitor. He'll have you executed before dawn. I know, and you're still going. Yes, he studied her, looking for something. Fear, maybe, or doubt, or any sign that she was making a mistake. He found none, because she'd already made her choice, and second-guessing wouldn't change the outcome. Take this, Draven said. He pulled a knife from his belt. Small, sharp. The blade was etched with runes that glowed faintly in the firelight. Silver and iron. Works on both humans and shifters. If you have to fight, aim for the throat. Don't hesitate. Elyra took the knife. It felt heavier than it should, like it carried the weight of every life it had taken. Thank you. Don't thank me. Just don't get killed. I need you alive. For the curse. Yes, for the curse. The words hung between them. Not for her, not because she mattered, but because she was useful. That was the truth about their arrangement. They were bound by necessity, not choice, not affection, just the mutual need to survive. And yet, something had shifted between them over the past days, some understanding that went deeper than words. They were both trapped, both fighting the same enemy, both trying to hold together something larger than themselves. That created a bond whether they wanted it or not. I'll see you before dawn, she said. You better. Midnight in Blackthorn's citadel felt like walking through a tomb. Corridors empty except for guards stationed at intervals. Torches burning low, shadows that moved wrong. Finn met her in the kitchens. He looked terrified, hands shaking as he handed her a map. I marked the fastest route, he said. 3 guard posts between here and the vault. Shift changes happen at the second bell. That gives you maybe 10 minutes. What happens after 10 minutes? New guards arrive. They'll notice the door is open. Then alarms. Elyra studied the map. What about getting out? That's your problem. I can only help you get in. Fair enough. Finn grabbed her wrist. His grip was surprisingly strong. Be careful. Malric doesn't just plan for success. He plans for failures. For people who try to stop him. He's been 10 steps ahead this entire time. Then I'll have to be 11 steps ahead. That's not how math works. It is when you're desperate. She left through the servants' entrance, moved through passages that smelled like old stone and forgotten secrets, places where the citadel's foundation showed through the polished facade. The first guard post was easy, 2 soldiers half asleep. She slipped past while they were looking the other way. The second was harder. 3 guards, alert, watching the corridor with the kind of focus that came from being told something important was down there. Elyra waited in the shadows, counting heartbeats, waiting for the moment when attention wavered. One guard yawned, stretched, turned slightly away from his post. She moved, fast, silent, the way the wolf taught her, past them before they registered movement, down stairs that wound deeper into the citadel's skeleton, into spaces that felt older than the Empire itself. The vault was behind a door reinforced with iron and magic that hummed against her skin. 2 guards stood watch. This was the problem Finn had warned about. No way past without confrontation. Elyra stepped into the corridor. The guard saw her immediately, hands moving to weapons. Stop. Identify yourself. I'm Elyra Vale, the king's healer. I need access to the vault. The taller guard's eyes narrowed. At midnight, without authorization. I have authorization. The king needs specific items for a ritual to break the curse. Show us the written order. There isn't time for paperwork. He's deteriorating rapidly. The guards exchanged glances. The shorter one stepped forward. Miss Vale, we have orders. No one enters without direct authorization from His Majesty or Lord Malric. Of course, Malric would be on the access list. Elyra felt the wolf inside her push against her control. Wanting out, wanting to tear through obstacles with teeth and claws. She pushed it down, barely. Fine, she said. I'll get written authorization. But when the king dies because you followed procedure instead of using common sense, remember this conversation. She turned to leave. The taller guard grabbed her arm. Not so fast. How do we know you're really here for the king and not stealing from the vault? Because if I wanted to steal something, I wouldn't announce myself to guards. His grip tightened. Maybe we should take you to Lord Malric. Let him decide if your story holds up. That was exactly what she couldn't let happen. Elyra looked at his hand on her arm. Let go. Or what? Or I show you why the king brought me here instead of any other healer in the kingdom. She let the wolf surface. Just enough. Her eyes shifted, human to something older, something that recognized these men as prey. The guard released her immediately, stepped back, hand moving to his sword. The shorter guard drew his weapon. She's shifting. Sound the alarm. Elyra raised both hands. I'm not shifting. I'm just reminding you what I am, which is someone you don't want to fight in a closed corridor. The taller guard's blade cleared the scabbard. You're threatening royal guards. I'm stating facts. The truth about power is this. Sometimes showing you're capable of violence is more effective than actually being violent. The threat is enough. The demonstration of potential. But sometimes threats don't work. The taller guard lunged. Elyra moved on instinct, grabbed his wrist, twisted, used his momentum against him, slammed him into the wall hard enough to make his teeth crack together. The shorter guard swung his blade. She ducked, drove her elbow into his ribs, heard something crack. He went down gasping. The taller guard recovered, came at her again. This time she let the wolf out further. Claws emerged, not fully shifted, just enough to rake across his sword arm, draw blood. He screamed and dropped the weapon. Elyra grabbed him by the throat, slammed him against the door, let him see exactly what she was when she stopped pretending to be human. You're going to open this vault, she said quietly, and then you're going to forget I was here. The guard's eyes were wide with terror. He nodded. She released him. He fumbled with keys, hand shaking so badly it took 3 tries to get the lock open. The door swung inward. Elyra looked at both guards. If you report this, I'll tell the king you were sleeping on duty. See who he believes. She stepped into the vault. Behind her, the guards didn't move. Too terrified. Too smart. The vault was exactly what she expected. Rows of shelves containing items taken from executed traitors. Jewelry. Weapons. Personal effects cataloged and stored because destroying them felt wasteful. She moved quickly, searching for anything connected to Draven. The shelves stretched back further than she expected. Decades of accumulated evidence from purges and executions. A museum of violence disguised as organization. She found boxes marked with noble house crests, items wrapped in cloth, weapons still stained with the blood of people who'd tried and failed to claim the throne. This was the Empire's true face, not the grand halls and silver banners, but this room full of reminders that power required constant pruning, constant elimination of threats. 10 minutes had passed, maybe more. The new guards would be arriving soon. Elyra moved faster, pulling open boxes, checking labels, found it in the back corner. A locked box marked with the king's seal. She broke the lock with a claw. Inside were items she recognized from descriptions. A piece of cloth stained with blood, hair bound with silver wire. A small vial containing something dark, blood magic components, everything needed to curse someone through their bloodline. And beneath them, a journal. Elyra opened it carefully. The handwriting was Malric's, page after page of notes about the curse, calculations, adjustments, plans stretching back years. She read fragments that made her blood run cold. The First Bloodline must be preserved in small numbers, enough to serve as tools, but not enough to threaten the throne. I have ensured 3 survivors remain. They will be useful when the time comes. 3 survivors. She was one. Who were the others? Further down, Draven's arrogance makes him predictable. He believes eliminating threats makes him safe. He doesn't understand that sometimes keeping enemies alive and controlled is more valuable than killing them. When he needs the old blood to save him, I will be the only one who knows where to find it. And near the end, the curse is ready. Activation during the Osmond execution will provide perfect cover. Everyone will be watching the beheading. No one will notice the blood ritual occurring simultaneously. Draven will sicken slowly, publicly, and when he's weak enough, the succession will be mine. Elyra felt rage and vindication in equal measure. This was proof, absolute, undeniable, written in Malric's own hand. She grabbed the journal and the components, turned to leave. Lord Malric stood in the doorway. Behind him, 6 soldiers with weapons drawn. His expression was calm, almost pleased. "I was wondering when you'd figure it out," he said. The world narrowed to this moment, this doorway, this man who'd orchestrated 16 years of suffering and was now standing between her and escape. Elyra's hand tightened on the journal. "This proves everything. You cursed him. You orchestrated the entire bloodline purge just to position yourself for this moment." Malric stepped into the vault. "Indeed. Quite clever, wasn't it? 16 years of planning, cultivating the right alliances, making sure my dear cousin remained dependent on advisors he thought he could trust. Why? Because Draven is a brute who rules through fear and violence. The Empire deserves better. It deserves someone who understands that power comes from intelligence rather than intimidation. So you're killing him to save the Empire. I'm killing him because I'm better suited to rule. The Empire is simply my justification." He gestured to the soldiers. "Take her. Confiscate the journal." Elyra backed up. "Touch me, and I shift. You'll have a full wolf loose in your citadel." Malric smiled. "Go ahead. Shift. Attack my soldiers. Kill them if you can. It will only prove you're exactly as dangerous as I've been telling the noble houses. A wild thing that can't be controlled. A threat that needs to be eliminated." The trap closed around her. If she fought, she proved she was dangerous. If she surrendered, the evidence disappeared. Either way, Malric won. This is the thing about chess played at the highest level. The real victory isn't checkmate. It's the moment your opponent realizes every move they can make leads to defeat. When they see the trap close and understand there's no escape. Malric had built this moment years ago. Every piece positioned perfectly, every option leading to the same outcome. The soldiers moved in. Elyra felt the wolf inside her howl with rage. Every instinct screamed to fight, to tear through them and run. But running meant leaving Draven to die. And despite everything, despite the fact that he'd killed her family and destroyed her bloodline, she couldn't do that. Because the Empire would burn if he died. Millions would suffer. And becoming a monster to save herself wasn't survival. It was surrender. She dropped the journal, raised her hands. Malric's smile widened. Wise choice. The soldiers grabbed her arms, stripped away the components, took everything. Malric picked up the journal, flipped through pages. Such damning evidence. It would be a shame if it were destroyed. He walked to a brazier burning in the corner, dropped the journal into the flames.
Elyra watched 16 years of planning and proof turn to ash.
No. Malric turned back to her. Yes. And now there's no evidence, just the word of a mountain girl with old blood against the king's most trusted advisor. Who do you think the court will believe? You won't get away with this. I already have. Draven is dying. You're infected. In 45 days, the curse completes, and I ascend to the throne with full support of the noble houses who already see me as the natural successor. What about the soldiers? They heard everything. Malric glanced at the guards. They serve me. Their loyalty was purchased years ago. One of the soldiers stepped forward, pressed a blade against Elyra's throat. She felt cold steel against her skin. Lord Malric, the soldier said, should we eliminate her now? Malric considered. His face showed calculation, weighing options like a merchant counting coin. No, he said finally. She's more useful alive. Lock her in the lower cells, isolation, no visitors. When the king asks about her disappearance, we'll say she fled. Couldn't handle the pressure, abandoned him to die alone. That's a lie. Of course it is. But it's the lie that will break him. Draven's greatest weakness has always been his inability to trust. When he believes you've betrayed him, he'll stop fighting. He'll accept death as inevitable, and the curse will finish him faster. Malric walked to the door, paused. You could have been valuable, Miss Vale, if you'd chosen to work with me instead of against me. But you made your choice. Now you'll live just long enough to watch everything collapse. He left. The soldiers dragged her out of the vault, through corridors she didn't recognize, downstairs that went deeper than she thought the citadel extended, into darkness that smelled like despair and forgotten prisoners. The lower cells were where the Empire sent people it wanted to forget, not execute, just erase, make disappear so thoroughly that even their names faded from memory. They threw her into a cell carved from stone, no windows, no light except what came through the bars. The door slammed shut, locked. Elyra stood in the darkness and felt the full weight of failure crash over her. She'd found the proof, and it didn't matter. Malric had burned the evidence, bought the loyalty of everyone who witnessed his confession, positioned her disappearance as betrayal. Draven would think she'd abandoned him. The court would believe Malric's lies. And in 45 days, the Empire would belong to the man who'd orchestrated everything. She sank to the floor. The wolf inside her howled, but there was nowhere to run, no enemy to fight, just stone walls and darkness, and the curse slowly eating her alive. This was what defeat felt like. Not dramatic, not violent, just quiet and absolute. The thing about hitting bottom is you stop falling, you hit solid ground, and then you have to decide whether to stay there or figure out how to climb back up. Elyra sat in that darkness for what felt like hours, maybe days. Time lost meaning when you couldn't see the sun. The curse was spreading faster now. She could feel it in her bones, in the way her heart beat irregular, in the way the wolf inside her grew weaker with each passing moment. She was dying, and no one was coming. Then she heard footsteps. Slow, deliberate, getting closer. A torch appeared beyond the bars. Finn's face emerged from the darkness. He looked terrified, hands shaking as he fumbled with keys. "What are you doing?" Elyra whispered. Her voice came out rough. "Unused. Getting you out. What does it look like? How did you find me?" "I followed the soldiers after you disappeared, watched where they took you, spent the last 6 hours stealing keys from the guard rotation." The lock clicked. The door opened. Finn grabbed her arm. "Can you walk?" "Barely." "Then we need to move. Now, before they realize you're gone." She stumbled out of the cell, leaned against him for support. "Where are we going?" "To the king. He needs to know what Malric did." "Malric burned the evidence." "It's my word against his. Then we make him believe your word." They moved through corridors lit only by Finn's torch. Servants' passages. Places where guards didn't patrol because nobles didn't care what happened in the spaces between their luxury. Halfway up, Elyra's legs gave out. She collapsed against the wall, gasping. The curse was strangling her from the inside. Finn knelt beside her. "Stay with me. We're almost there. I can't. It's too strong. You have to. If you die, the king dies. If the king dies, Malric wins. Is that what you want?" "No." "Then get up." She forced herself to stand, one step, then another, pain screaming through every nerve. Each movement felt like dragging herself through broken glass.
The curse had wrapped around her heart, her lungs. Every breath was a battle, but she kept moving, because giving up wasn't an option. They reached the king's chambers. Finn knocked, hard, urgent. No response. He knocked again. The door opened. Draven stood there looking like death barely held at bay. His face was pale, eyes shadowed, hands trembling. When he saw Elyra, something shifted in his expression. Relief, rage, confusion. "Where the hell have you been?" he said. "Malric told me you fled, that you couldn't handle the pressure and abandoned." He stopped, looked at her more carefully, saw the bruises, the exhaustion, the way she could barely stand. "What happened?" Elyra met his eyes. "Malric cursed you. I have proof, had proof. He burned it. But I saw everything, the journal, the components. He's been planning this for 16 years. Draven's jaw tightened. Start from the beginning. She told him everything, the archives, the journal entries, the vault, Malric's confession, the evidence burning, the cells. Finn corroborated what he could. When she finished, Draven was silent. He walked to the window, stared out at his citadel, hands gripping the stone so hard his knuckles went white. "Malric," he said quietly, "my own blood, my most trusted advisor. The person positioned to benefit most from your death," Elyra said. Draven turned. His eyes were cold, empty. "Why should I believe you? You're from the bloodline I destroyed. You have every reason to lie, to create division, to weaken me further." The accusation hit like a blade. Elyra felt something inside her crack. "Because I could have let you die," she said. "I could have walked away, let the curse finish you and watched the empire burn. But I didn't. I've been fighting to save your life even though you killed my parents, even though you destroyed everything I should have had." Her voice broke. "So if you think I'm lying, then kill me now, because I'm done begging monsters to see the truth." The silence stretched. Draven studied her, looking for deception, for manipulation, for any sign that this was an elaborate trap. He found none, because she was telling the truth, and truth had a weight that lies couldn't replicate. He walked to a cabinet, pulled out a vial of silver liquid, drank it. His body convulsed. He grabbed the table, gritted his teeth against whatever the liquid was doing to him. After a moment, he straightened. His eyes were clearer. The tremor in his hands steadied. "Suppression tonic," he said. "Bought me a few hours of clarity, enough to deal with this." He looked at Finn. "Get Master Corvin. Tell him to bring every record he has on Lord Malric, every text he's accessed, every research request, everything." Finn nodded and ran. Draven turned back to Elyra. "If you're right about this, I'm going to execute my own cousin in front of the entire court. If you're wrong, I'll have fractured every alliance I've built and handed the empire to whoever's strong enough to take it. I'm not wrong. You better not be." He grabbed his sword from the wall, buckled it on with hands that still shook slightly. "What are you going to do?" Elyra asked. "What I should have done years ago. Stop trusting people just because they smile and bow." He walked to the door, paused. "Thank you for not abandoning me." Elyra felt something shift between them. Not forgiveness, not absolution. Just acknowledgement that they were fighting the same battle against the same enemy. "Don't thank me yet," she said. "Malric has half the noble houses backing him. This is going to get bloody. Everything in this empire gets bloody eventually." But he didn't leave. He stood there looking at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "I was wrong," he said finally. "About your family, about the purge. I thought eliminating threats before they became real was the logical choice. I thought it made the empire safer, and now I understand that fear-based logic creates the very threats it's trying to prevent. I made enemies out of people who could have been allies. I destroyed families who might have strengthened the bloodlines instead of threatening them." Elyra met his eyes. "That doesn't undo what you did." "No, it doesn't. But it means I won't make the same mistake twice." He opened the door. "When this is over," he said, "when we've dealt with Malric and broken the curse, I want to help you find the other survivors, the ones Malric kept alive. Your people deserve to know they're not alone." "Why would you do that?" "Because it's the right thing, and because I'm tired of building an empire on graves." He left. Elyra stood in his chambers and felt something fundamental shift inside her. Not forgiveness, but understanding. Draven was a killer, a tyrant, a man who'd built his throne on violence and fear. But he was also trying to be better, trying to break cycles he'd spent his whole life perpetuating, and maybe that mattered. Maybe the willingness to change was worth something even when the damage couldn't be undone. Finn returned with Master Corvin. The old scholar carried a stack of records, face grim. "I've compiled everything," Corvin said. "Every text Malric accessed, every research request, every notation. The pattern is undeniable." He spread documents across the war table. Elyra and Draven studied them together. The evidence was circumstantial, no smoking gun, no signed confession, but the pattern was clear: years of research into blood magic, curse construction, bloodline tracking, all conducted by Malric under the guise of historical scholarship. "It's not enough to convict him in court," Draven said, "but it's enough to justify questioning him publicly. And if he's as arrogant as I think he is, he'll slip, he'll say something he shouldn't, and when he does, I'll have him." "What if he doesn't slip?" Elyra asked. "Then I execute him anyway and deal with the political fallout. Sometimes you have to choose between justice and stability. I'm choosing justice, even if it costs you the throne, especially if it costs me the throne, because a throne built on lies isn't worth keeping." He looked at Corvin. "Summon the court, full assembly, dawn, everyone required to attend." Corvin bowed. "It will be done." After he left, Draven poured 2 glasses of whiskey, handed one to Elyra. "To terrible choices," he said, "and worse consequences." They drank. The whiskey burned going down, sharp and bitter and somehow appropriate. "Get some rest," Draven said. "Tomorrow is going to be ugly." Elyra set down the glass. "One more thing. Malric said there were 3 survivors of the First Bloodline. I'm one. Who are the others?" "I don't know, but we'll find them. After we survive tomorrow." She left his chambers and walked back to her own. The corridors were empty, silent, like the citadel itself was holding its breath waiting for dawn. In her room, she stripped off clothes stained with blood and dirt, stood by the window looking out at the obsidian towers rising against the pre-dawn darkness. Somewhere in those towers, Malric was sleeping, confident in his victory, certain that his plans were unfolding perfectly. He had no idea what was coming. The wolf inside her stirred, weaker than before, struggling against the curse's grip, but still there, still fighting. Elyra pressed her palm against the cold glass. Tomorrow, everything would change. Either they'd expose Malric and break the curse, or they'd die trying, but at least they'd die fighting. At least they'd refuse to surrender. And sometimes that was all you had. The refusal to give up even when every logical calculation said you should. The stubborn insistence on survival even when the odds were impossible. The willingness to become exactly what your enemies feared because transformation was better than extinction. She closed her eyes, reached for the wolf, and for the first time in days, it reached back. Not weak, not dying, but waiting. For the moment when holding back was no longer an option, when survival meant embracing the beast completely, when transformation was the only path forward, dawn was coming, and with it, blood. Dawn was coming, and with it, blood. The great hall filled before sunrise. Nobles arrived in silence, their usual chatter replaced by tension so thick it pressed against the walls. They knew something was happening, could feel it in the way guards lined every entrance, in the way servants moved with rigid efficiency instead of casual grace. This wasn't a normal assembly. This was a trial disguised as a gathering. Elyra stood in the shadows near the king's entrance, watching the court file in, recognizing faces from dinners where they'd smiled and lied and calculated how to use her. Lady Cressida arrived draped in silk that cost more than most families earned in a year. Lord Garrett followed with his scarred hands and soldier's posture. A dozen other nobles whose names she'd learned but whose loyalties remained mysteries. And then Lord Malric entered. He moved through the crowd like a man who already owned the room, dressed in black velvet, hair perfect, expression calm. He nodded to nobles who bowed, smiled at ladies who blushed. He looked like a king waiting to be crowned. Elyra felt her hands curl into fists. The curse pulsed inside her veins, stronger this morning, like it knew something was about to break. She could feel it spreading, ice crystallizing in her blood, making every breath a battle. Finn appeared beside her, pale, nervous. I compiled additional evidence, cross-referenced every text Malric accessed with dates of significant events. The pattern is damning. Will it be enough? In a court that values logic over loyalty? Maybe. In a court loyal to Malric? Probably not. Then what's the point? Finn looked at her. The point is we're fighting back. Sometimes that's all you can do. The drums sounded. 3 deep strikes that silenced every conversation. The doors opened. King Draven Caelthorn entered wearing full royal regalia, black armor etched with silver, a crown that looked more like a weapon than decoration. The sword at his hip had seen more blood than most battlefields. He looked like death given form and purpose. But Elyra could see the truth beneath the performance, the way his hands trembled slightly before he clasped them behind his back, the pallor under his skin, the effort it took to walk straight when the curse was eating him from inside. This was a dying man pretending to be invincible, and the court couldn't tell the difference. That's the thing about power at the highest level. It's half substance and half theater. The performance matters as much as the reality. Maybe more. Because people follow strength, and strength is often just the convincing illusion of control. The court knelt, all except Malric, who bowed with just enough respect to avoid open defiance. Draven walked to the throne, stood before it but didn't sit. "Rise," he said. The court stood, silent, stretched, waiting. Draven let it build, let the tension coil tighter, let every person in that hall understand they were about to witness something that would reshape the empire. When he finally spoke, his voice carried to every corner. "We are gathered because the throne has been attacked, not by foreign enemies, not by ambitious lords making open challenges, but by poison, by curse, by betrayal from within." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Malric's expression didn't change. "For the past 6 weeks," Draven continued, "I have been dying. Every healer in the kingdom failed to identify the cause, until Miss Elyra Vale arrived and discovered the truth. I am infected with a blood curse designed specifically to destroy the royal bloodline." More murmurs, louder now. Lady Cressida leaned toward the noble beside her, whispering. Others followed suit. Draven raised his hand. Silence fell immediately. "The curse was not random," he said. "It was engineered by someone with extensive knowledge of blood magic, someone with access to personal effects needed for such rituals, someone who stood to gain everything from my death." Every eye in the hall shifted, looking at neighbors, calculating who among them might be guilty. Malric stepped forward. "Your Majesty, if you're implying that someone in this court is responsible, perhaps you should name them directly instead of creating paranoia." His voice was smooth, reasonable, the voice of a trusted advisor concerned about his king's deteriorating judgment. Draven's eyes locked onto him. "Very well. Lord Malric Voss, my cousin, my advisor, you are accused of high treason, of cursing the king, of orchestrating the deaths of innocent families to position yourself for succession." The hall erupted. Nobles shouting, some in support of Malric, others calling for immediate execution. The noise was deafening. Guards moved to the edges of the room, hands on weapons, ready to restore order if the assembly descended into violence. Malric raised his hands, calling for calm. When the crowd quieted, he turned to Draven with an expression of wounded dignity. "Your Majesty, I have served you faithfully for years. I have advised you through wars and rebellions. I have stood by your side when others fled, and now you accuse me of treason based on what evidence exactly?" Draven gestured to Master Corvin. The old scholar stepped forward, carrying the stack of records. He spread them across a table where everyone could see. "These are archives detailing Lord Malric's research over the past 16 years, Corvin said. His voice was steady despite the hostile crowd. "He has studied blood magic extensively, curse construction, bloodline tracking, all under the guise of historical scholarship." Malric smiled. "I'm a scholar. Of course I research history. That proves nothing." "It proves you had the knowledge," Draven said. "Knowledge isn't guilt, Your Majesty. Half the scholars in this citadel have studied similar topics. Will you accuse all of them as well?" Corvin continued. The former Master of Archives noted discrepancies in bloodline elimination records, families marked as destroyed but missing confirmation. He brought this to Lord Malric's attention. 6 months later, that master died of sudden heart failure. Malric's expression remained calm. A tragedy. But heart failure is common in elderly scholars. You're connecting unrelated events to build a narrative. Elyra stepped out of the shadows. The crowd saw her and conversations died mid-sentence. She walked forward, every step deliberate, until she stood beside Draven facing the court. "I found evidence," she said, her voice carried despite not being loud. "In the vault beneath the eastern tower, a journal written in Lord Malric's hand detailing the curse, blood components used in the ritual, everything needed to prove his guilt." "Where's this evidence now?" Malric asked smoothly. "Burned. You destroyed it after imprisoning me in the lower cells. Convenient. So we have only your word, the word of a woman whose family was executed by this very throne, who has every reason to seek revenge, who might fabricate accusations to destabilize the Empire." The crowd shifted, some nodding. Malric's logic was working. "She's lying!" someone shouted from the back. A noble Elyra didn't recognize, trying to turn us against each other. Others joined in, voices rising, accusations flying. This is the problem with truth when it's pitted against well-crafted lies. Truth is often messy, circumstantial, based on patterns that require interpretation. Lies can be clean, simple, designed to fit exactly what people want to believe. And people wanted to believe Malric, because believing him meant the Empire was stable. The succession was clear, nothing fundamental had to change. Believing Elyra meant confronting the fact that the king's most trusted advisor had been planning his murder for 16 years, that the Empire's leadership was rotten at its core, that everything they thought they knew was wrong. Most people chose comfort over truth. It's easier that way, safer. You don't have to question the foundations of power if you can dismiss the person pointing out the cracks. Draven saw it happening, saw the court swaying toward Malric, saw his own authority crumbling. He did the only thing left. "Trial by combat," he said. The hall went silent. Malric's eyes widened slightly. That's the first crack in his composure. "Your Majesty, that's archaic. We settled disputes through law centuries ago. And yet the law allows it. You claim innocence. I accuse you of treason. We settle it with blood. If you win, you're proven innocent and take the throne. If I win, justice is served. If you win," Malric said carefully, "you'll be too weak to hold the throne. The curse is killing you. Everyone can see it. Even if you defeat me, you'll die within weeks and the Empire collapses into chaos. Then that's my choice to make." Draven drew his sword. The sound of steel clearing the scabbard echoed through the hall like a death knell. Malric stared at him, calculating, weighing options. He could refuse, claim the trial was illegitimate, but that would look like cowardice, would undermine his support among nobles who valued strength above everything. Or he could fight, bet that Draven was weak enough to be beaten, take the throne immediately instead of waiting for the curse to finish the job. The calculation played out across his face in seconds. Malric smiled. "Very well, Your Majesty. If blood is what you want, blood is what you'll get." He drew his own blade. The court backed away, creating a circle, giving them space. Servants rushed to move furniture, clear the floor, make room for violence that would decide the Empire's future. Elyra grabbed Draven's arm. "You can't do this. The curse has you half dead already. He'll kill you." Draven looked at her. His eyes were clear despite the exhaustion carved into his face. "Then I die fighting instead of wasting away. That's the only dignity I have left. There are other ways." "No, there aren't. The court won't accept evidence they can't see. They need something visceral, something undeniable. Blood is the only language they understand." He pulled free, walked to the center of the circle. Malric faced him, both men in fighting stances, both understanding that only one would walk away. This is what leadership at the highest level looks like when all the masks fall away. Not strategy sessions or political maneuvering, but two men with swords deciding the fate of millions through violence. Because at the end of everything, power comes down to this: the willingness to bleed, the refusal to surrender, the stubborn insistence on fighting even when logic says you've already lost. "Yield now," Malric said quietly. "Die with whatever honor you have left. Don't make me humiliate you in front of your entire court." Draven's response was to attack. Fast, brutal. The kind of opening strike that left no room for conversation. Malric blocked. Barely. The clash of steel rang through the hall. They fought like men who'd spent their lives studying violence. Every move calculated, every strike designed to kill or maim, no wasted motion, no theatrics. Just two predators trying to tear each other apart. But Draven was slower than he should be. His movements compromised by the curse eating him from inside. Malric saw it immediately. Began pressing the advantage, driving Draven back, forcing him to defend instead of attack. The king's breathing grew labored, sweat dripping despite the cool air. Each block cost him more energy than it should. The court watched in silence, nobles calculating who to support based on who looked like winning. That's the truth about loyalty in places like this. It's transactional, based on power rather than principle. People follow strength because strength protects them. Weakness gets you abandoned. And Draven was looking weak. Malric landed a hit, his blade slicing across Draven's shoulder, drawing blood. The king stumbled, caught himself, blocked the follow-up strike, but his hands were shaking, his stance compromised. He was losing. Elyra felt the wolf inside her howl, screaming to intervene, to shift and tear Malric apart. But this wasn't her fight. This was between two men who'd spent their lives building and betraying empires, between a king trying to hold together something larger than himself and an advisor who'd decided he could do it better. Draven attacked again, desperation fueling his strikes. He landed a hit, cut across Malric's ribs. But Malric barely flinched, just smiled and pressed harder. "You're dying," Malric said between strikes. "Everyone can see it. Yield. Let the succession happen peacefully." Draven's response was wordless rage. He fought like a cornered animal. All instinct, no strategy. It wasn't enough. Malric disarmed him, sent the sword clattering across stone, drove his own blade toward Draven's chest. The king twisted, barely avoided the killing blow, but Malric's sword caught him in the side, drove deep. Draven went down, blood spreading across the floor in a pool that reflected torchlight like a crimson mirror. The court erupted, some cheering, others shouting. The noise was chaos. Malric stood over him, blade raised for the final strike. "This is what happens when you let emotion rule instead of logic," he said. "You lose." He brought the sword down. Elyra moved, not thinking, not planning, just reacting. She was across the hall before conscious thought caught up, before anyone could stop her, before even Malric registered the threat. She grabbed his wrist, stopped the blade inches from Draven's throat. Malric turned, shocked. "You." The wolf inside her broke free, not fully, not into complete transformation, but enough. Her eyes shifted. Human to something older, something that recognized these men as prey. Claws emerged, black and sharp. Strength that came from something older than human limits flooded her muscles. She twisted Malric's wrist, hard enough to hear bone crack. His sword fell. Then she threw him backward, sent him sliding across blood-slicked stone until he crashed into the circle of nobles. The court screamed, backing away, terrified of what she'd become. This is the moment people always fear, when the mask comes off completely, when the thing they've been whispering about in corners becomes real and visible and undeniable. Elyra had spent 16 years hiding what she was, pretending to be human, keeping the wolf caged. Not anymore. Malric scrambled to his feet, clutching his broken wrist, his composure finally shattered, blood running from where he'd hit the stone. "You're a monster," he spat. "This proves everything I've been saying. The old blood can't be controlled. They're too dangerous to live." Elyra walked toward him, each step deliberate, the wolf visible in her movements, in the way she held herself, in the predatory focus that made nobles scramble backward. "Here's what you don't understand about monsters," she said. Her voice came out rough. "Part human, part beast. We're only dangerous when you give us no choice." "You always had choices." "No. I had survival. That's not the same thing." She was close enough now to see fear in his eyes. Real fear. The kind that came from realizing you'd miscalculated. That the weapon you'd been manipulating had turned on you. "You cursed an empire because you thought you were smarter than everyone else," she continued. "You orchestrated deaths and manipulated lives because you saw people as pieces in a game. But you forgot something crucial." "What?" "Monsters don't play games. We end them." She grabbed him by the throat, lifted him off the ground with strength that shouldn't be possible in her frame. Malric clawed at her hand, gasping, his feet kicking uselessly, the broken wrist hanging at a wrong angle. "Elyra!" Draven's voice cut through the chaos. "Don't!" She turned. He was on his knees, one hand pressed against the wound in his side, blood seeping between his fingers. His face was white, but his eyes were clear. "Don't kill him like this," Draven said. "Not in rage, not without control. That makes you exactly what he says you are. He deserves to die, yes. But not by execution disguised as justice. If you kill him now, half the court will see you as the monster. They'll hunt down every survivor of the old blood because you proved they were right to fear you." Elyra felt the wolf inside her snarl, demanding blood, demanding vengeance for 16 years of manipulation, for her parents, for every person who died because Malric decided they were inconvenient. The rage was a living thing, howling through her veins, begging to be released. But Draven was right. Killing Malric satisfied nothing, changed nothing, just perpetuated the cycle of violence that had destroyed her family in the first place. And she was so tired of cycles, so tired of violence breeding more violence, until no one remembered why it started. Someone had to choose differently. She dropped him. Malric collapsed, gasping, clutching his throat, coughing up blood. "Guards!" Draven called, his voice weak but carrying command. "Arrest Lord Malric Voss. Charge him with high treason. He will stand trial properly, with evidence, with witnesses, with law instead of blood." The guards hesitated, looking between the king bleeding on the floor and the advisor who'd almost taken the throne. "Now," Draven said. They moved, grabbed Malric, dragged him to his feet. He looked at Draven with pure hatred. "This isn't over. The noble houses will riot. They'll tear this empire apart before they accept your judgment. Then let them try. I'm done building power on fear. If the empire can't survive justice, it doesn't deserve to survive." Malric was dragged away, screaming threats and promises of civil war, his voice echoing through the hall until doors slammed and cut it off. The court stood in shocked silence. No one moved. No one spoke. They just stared at Draven bleeding on the stone and Elyra standing over him with claws still extended and eyes still wrong. Elyra turned to the nobles. Her voice came out steady, cold. "You wanted to know what I am. Now you know. I'm the thing your empire tried to eliminate because you were terrified of anything you couldn't control. But I'm also the thing standing between your king and death. So ask yourselves which scares you more." She knelt beside Draven, pressed her hands against the wound. "You're an idiot. You know that. Frequently reminded. You could have died. Was going to die anyway. At least this way I chose how." She felt the curse pulsing between them, stronger now, fed by the blood and violence and proximity to death. It was wrapped around both their hearts, squeezing. They were running out of time. Master Corvin appeared, his face grim. "Your Majesty, the wound needs treatment immediately." Servants rushed forward with supplies. They tried to pull Draven toward the side room where physicians waited. He resisted. "Not yet. The court needs to see me standing. You can barely kneel. Then help me up." Elyra and Corvin lifted him, supporting his weight, getting him to his feet. Draven faced the court, blood dripping, breathing labored, but standing. This is what true leadership looks like in its rawest form. Not the polished speeches or strategic brilliance, but the stubborn refusal to surrender even when your body is screaming that you should. It's the willingness to stand when standing costs everything, to show strength when you have none left, to maintain the performance even when the audience can see you dying. Because the moment you fall, the empire falls with you. "Lord Malric will stand trial," Draven said. "Anyone who wishes to challenge that decision can face me personally. Anyone who wants to support him can leave the Citadel now. I'm done pretending loyalty exists where there's only ambition." No one moved. Not out of loyalty necessarily, but out of fear. Out of recognition that challenging a man who just survived assassination and fought through a death curse was suicidal. "Good," Draven said. "Then we're done here." He collapsed. Elyra caught him before he hit the ground, his weight dragging them both down. "Medics!" she shouted. "Now!" They came running, carrying supplies, a stretcher,
moving with practiced efficiency born from treating battlefield wounds. They lifted Draven, started moving him toward the medical wing. Elyra followed, refusing to let him out of her sight, blood still on her hands, claws still extended, the wolf still too close to the surface. Behind them, the court erupted into chaos, nobles arguing, factions forming, the empire fracturing in real time. But that wasn't her concern right now. Right now, all that mattered was keeping Draven alive long enough to break the curse. The medical wing smelled like herbs and desperation. Physicians worked on Draven with practiced efficiency, cleaning the wound, stitching flesh, administering potions that dulled pain but did nothing for the curse. Elyra stood in the corner, watching, her hands still stained with his blood. The wolf slowly retreating back into the cage she'd kept it in for 16 years. But the bars felt thinner now, more fragile. She'd let it out, let people see what she was capable of. There was no hiding anymore. A physician approached her, older woman with steady hands and eyes that had seen too much death. He'll live, for now. But the curse is accelerating. The violence triggered something, made it stronger. How long does he have? Days. Maybe a week if we're lucky. Elyra felt her chest tighten. We need to break it. There has to be a way. If there is, I don't know it. Blood curses this powerful require either the caster's death or a ritual equally powerful to counter it. Then we kill Malric. The physician shook her head. Killing him might make it worse. Curses tied to living casters often have fail-safes. If Malric dies, the curse could complete immediately. We need him alive long enough to extract the counter ritual, assuming he knows it, assuming he'll tell us, which he won't. Because why would he? He's already lost everything. The only power he has left is watching them die. Elyra walked to where Draven lay unconscious. His face was pale, breathing shallow, the curse visible now as dark veins spreading across his skin like roots. She reached out, pressed her palm against his chest. The curse recognized her immediately, reached for her like something alive and hungry. She felt it wrap around her own heart, squeezing, feeding. They were both dying, and time was running out. Finn appeared in the doorway. He looked exhausted, carrying books that probably weighed more than he did. I searched every text in the archives, cross-referenced everything with Malric's research notes. I think I found something. What? A reference to Moonveil Bloom, a mythical flower that grows only during eclipses in sacred territories. It's supposed to be able to break blood curses, sever the connection between caster and victim. Elyra turned. Where? The Veilfang Wastes, guarded by primordial wolves that don't recognize any authority. The territory is considered sacred. No one goes there. The few who've tried never came back. How far? 3 weeks on foot. Maybe 2 if you push hard. Through mountains and forests where everything wants to kill you. Elyra looked at Draven's unconscious form. Then that's where I'm going. Finn stared at her. You can barely stand. The curse is eating you alive. How are you going to travel through hostile territory? By refusing to die until I've saved him. This is insane. Yes, but sanity hasn't gotten us anywhere. The physician stepped forward. You'll need supplies, weapons, medicine, and someone who knows the territory. I'll figure it out as I go. You'll be dead in 3 days. Maybe, but at least I'll die trying instead of waiting. Elyra turned back to Draven. His chest rose and fell. Shallow breaths, each one a battle against the curse. She leaned close, whispered even though he couldn't hear. I'm going to save you, not because you deserve it, but because the Empire needs you, and because I'm tired of cycles ending in blood. She straightened, looked at Finn. Give me maps. Mark the fastest route, and find me whatever texts you have on the Moonveil Bloom. I need to know what I'm looking for. Finn nodded and ran. The physician grabbed her arm. If you do this, you're walking into a death trap. The wastes are sacred for a reason. The wolves there don't answer to anyone. They kill intruders on sight. Then I'll have to convince them not to kill me. How? By showing them I'm not an intruder. I'm one of them. She left the medical wing, walked through corridors filled with servants whispering about the trial, about the fight, about the monster the king had brought into their citadel. Let them whisper. She was done hiding what she was. In her chambers, she gathered supplies, weapons, herbs, the knife Draven had given her, clothes suitable for mountain travel. A knock came at the door. She opened it expecting Finn with maps. Found Lady Cressida instead. The noble stood there, no longer draped in silk, wearing traveling clothes, leather boots, a pack slung over her shoulder, hair tied back practically. "I'm coming with you," Cressida said. Elyra stared at her. "Why?" "Because I'm tired of watching this empire destroy itself. And because someone needs to make sure you don't die heroically before you reach the wastes. I don't need help." "Yes, you do. You're half dead from the curse and about to walk into territory where everything wants to kill you. Pride is admirable. Stupidity isn't. What's in this for you?" Cressida met her eyes. Redemption. "I've spent years playing politics, choosing self-interest over principle. Smiling at people I despised, supporting policies I knew were wrong. Maybe this time I choose differently." Elyra studied her, looking for deception, for hidden motives, found only exhaustion and something that looked like genuine determination. "Fine, but if you slow me down, I leave you behind. Fair enough." Another knock. Finn entered carrying maps and a stack of books. I marked the route. "The wastes are here, 3 weeks minimum. The terrain is brutal. Mountains, forests, rivers that flood without warning." He spread the map across her table. Elyra studied it, memorizing landmarks, calculating distances. The path led through territory she'd never seen, past settlements she'd only heard about, into wilderness that predated the empire itself. "What about the wolves?" she asked. "The primordial ones. What do we know about them?" Finn opened one of the books. "Not much. They're older than the Shifter clans. Some texts claim they're the original wolves, the ones who chose to remain pure instead of taking human form. They're supposed to be massive, intelligent, territorial. Can they be reasoned with? Unknown. No one who's encountered them has lived to document it." "Wonderful." Cressida leaned over the map. "We'll need supplies for 3 weeks. Food, water, medicine, and weapons. Lots of weapons. We can't carry 3 weeks of supplies. We'll have to hunt, forage, find water as we go. Then we'll starve. Not if we're smart." Elyra rolled up the map. "We leave at nightfall. Meet me at the south gate." Cressida nodded and left. Finn remained, his face worried. "You know this is probably suicide." "Yes. And you're doing it anyway." "Yes." "Why?" "Because someone has to. Because the alternative is watching millions die in succession wars. Because I'm tired of being afraid." She looked at him. "Thank you. For everything. For the research. For believing me when no one else did." Finn pushed his spectacles up. "Just come back alive. The archives won't organize themselves." Despite everything, she smiled. After he left, Elyra stood alone in her chambers, looking out at the citadel, at the obsidian towers rising against the sky. This place had been a prison, a trap, a nest of vipers. But it had also been where she'd found purpose, where she'd stopped running and started fighting. The curse pulsed inside her, stronger with each hour. 42 days until the eclipse. Less now. Maybe 41. 41 days to cross impossible terrain. 41 days to find something that might be myth. 41 days to break a curse designed by the most intelligent enemy they'd ever faced. The odds were impossible. But impossible had never stopped her before. She gathered the last of her supplies, strapped the knife to her thigh, pulled on boots made for mountain travel. The wolf inside her stirred, restless, anticipating, ready. Nightfall came. Elyra left through servant passages, avoiding guards and nobles who might try to stop her. Cressida waited at the south gate, pack ready, face determined. They approached the gate together. The captain of the guard stepped forward. "Papers." "We don't have any." "Then you don't leave." Elyra met his eyes. "Let the wolf show just enough. We're leaving. You can step aside or you can try to stop us. Choose quickly." The captain's hand moved to his sword, then stopped. He'd seen what she did to Malric in the Great Hall, seen the strength that came from the old blood. He stepped aside. They walked through the gates, into darkness that stretched toward mountains barely visible against the night sky. Behind them, Blackthorn's citadel rose like a monument to power and violence and everything Elyra was trying to save. Ahead lay the Veilfang wastes, sacred territory, ancient wolves, a flower that might be myth. and 41 days until the eclipse. 41 days to do the impossible. The odds were stacked against them. The territory was hostile, the curse was accelerating, but they walked forward anyway, because sometimes survival isn't about having good options. It's about taking the only option available and refusing to surrender even when logic says you should. It's about the stubborn human insistence that impossible just means no one's succeeded yet. And Elyra had spent 16 years defying odds. This was just one more impossibility to overcome. They walked into the darkness, toward mountains that held secrets older than empires, toward territory where civilization ended and something wilder began, toward a confrontation that would either save them all or destroy everything. And behind them, in the Citadel's deepest cells, Lord Malric smiled, because he'd planned for this too, had known they'd search for the Moonveil bloom, had ensured that when they found it, they'd discover one final trap. The curse wasn't just killing them, it was leading them exactly where he wanted them to go, into the heart of sacred territory, where the primordial wolves waited, where the real test would begin, where Elyra would have to choose between saving Draven and embracing what she truly was, between remaining human and becoming the monster everyone feared, between survival and transformation, and in that choice, the fate of the Empire would be decided. The mountains loomed ahead, dark, impassable, ancient. Elyra adjusted her pack, felt the curse pulse inside her veins, felt the wolf stir in anticipation. "Let's go," she said, and they disappeared into the night, toward a destiny written in blood and moonlight, toward the moment when everything would change, toward the climax that would either save them all or end everything. The Empire held its breath, waiting, for the wolves to howl, for the blood to flow, for the curse to break or consume. And in the darkness, something ancient stirred, recognizing the scent of the first blood, calling her home, to the place where it all began and where it would all end. The mountains loomed ahead, dark, impassable, ancient. Elyra adjusted her pack, felt the curse pulse inside her veins, felt the wolf stir in anticipation. "Let's go," she said, and they disappeared into the night. The first 3 days were survival disguised as travel. They moved through forests where the trees grew so thick the sunlight barely penetrated, where the air tasted like moss and decay, where every shadow could hide predators who'd learned that humans made easy prey. Elyra felt the curse spreading with each mile. It wrapped around her lungs, made breathing an effort. Her hands shook when she thought no one was watching. The wolf inside her grew restless, clawing at the cage she'd kept it in. Cressida noticed but said nothing, just handed her water when she stumbled, shared dried meat when they stopped to rest, kept watch while Elyra tried to sleep and failed. On the 4th day, they reached the mountains. The Northreach Range stretched before them like the spine of some ancient creature turned to stone, peaks hidden in clouds, valleys carved by rivers that had given up and frozen centuries ago. The map Finn had given them showed a pass, narrow, treacherous, but supposedly traversable. They started climbing. The air grew thin, cold enough to make their breath visible. Elyra's legs burned with each step. The altitude combined with the curse made her feel like she was drowning on dry land. Cressida stopped, turned back. "You need to rest. We don't have time. You'll be dead before we reach the wastes if you don't rest. Then I'll die climbing. Keep moving." Cressida grabbed her arm. "Stop! Just stop for 5 minutes. The world won't end if you take 5 minutes." Elyra wanted to argue, wanted to push forward, wanted to ignore the exhaustion and pain and keep moving because stopping meant thinking and thinking meant confronting how impossible this was. But her legs wouldn't hold her anymore. She sank to the ground, back against cold stone, gasping. Cressida sat beside her, pulled out a canteen. "Drink." Elyra drank. The water was cold, sharp. It helped. "Why are you really here?" she asked. The truth this time. Cressida was quiet for a long moment, then she spoke. "I had a daughter, 10 years ago. She was 12, bright, curious, asked too many questions. One day she asked the wrong question to the wrong noble, about corruption, about missing tax revenue. The noble had her arrested for slander, executed before I could intervene." Elyra looked at her. "I'm sorry." Cressida's expression was hard, carved from old grief. "I could have fought, could have used my position. But I was afraid. afraid of losing my status, my wealth, everything I'd worked for. So I stayed silent. Let my daughter die because I was too much of a coward to fight the system. That's why you're here. That's why I'm here. Because I'm done being afraid. Because if I'm going to die, I want it to mean something. They sat in silence, two women carrying different kinds of loss, different kinds of guilt, both trying to outrun the past by walking toward an impossible future. After 5 minutes, Elyra stood. Let's keep moving. They climbed. On the 7th day, they encountered wolves, not the primordial ones, just a regular pack, maybe 15, lean and hungry, eyes glowing in the twilight. They circled, assessing, calculating whether 2 humans were worth the effort. Elyra felt them before she saw them, their thoughts brushing against her mind like whispers. Strangers, prey, hungry. She pushed back, not prey, kin. The lead wolf stopped, tilted its head, confused. Elyra let the wolf inside her surface. Just enough. Just the eyes, the scent, the presence that said she wasn't entirely human. The pack circled closer, sniffing, testing. The lead wolf approached, massive male with scars across his muzzle. He studied her with intelligence that went beyond animal instinct. You smell wrong, his thoughts whispered. Like pack but not pack. Like hunter but not hunter. What are you? Something old. Something your ancestors would recognize. The wolf's ears flattened. The first blood. Yes. The pack shifted, some backing away, others pressing closer. Curious. Wary. Why do you walk in our territory? The lead wolf asked. I'm looking for something. A flower that grows in the sacred lands. Moonveil bloom. The sacred lands are forbidden. The ancient ones guard them. They kill intruders. I'm not an intruder. I'm coming home. The wolf studied her for a long moment. Then he turned to his pack. Let them pass. The wolves melted back into the forest, disappearing like they'd never been there. Cressida exhaled. What just happened? I asked for permission. They gave it. You can talk to them. I can hear them. It's not the same as talking. More like understanding. That's terrifying. Yes, but useful. They walked on. Through valleys where the cold cut like knives, over ridges where one wrong step meant falling to death, past frozen streams where they broke ice to drink. The curse accelerated with each day. Elyra could feel it now like something alive eating her from inside. Her heart beat irregular, her vision blurred. The wolf inside her was weakening. Fighting a war it couldn't win. She had maybe a week left, maybe less. On the 14th day, they reached the Vale Fong Wastes. The territory was exactly what the text described. Desolate, beautiful. Wrong in ways that had nothing to do with geography and everything to do with the weight of time. Trees grew twisted, rocks formed patterns that looked almost intentional. The air hummed with something that wasn't quite sound. This is sacred ground, Elyra said quietly. Treated with respect or not at all? How do you know? I can feel it. Like the land itself is alive. Watching. They moved carefully, reverently, like walking through a cathedral built by something that predated words. And then they saw them, the primordial wolves. They emerged from the landscape like they'd always been there, massive, silver, eyes that held intelligence older than civilization. There were 7, each one the size of a horse, fur that caught the light like moonfire, presence that made Elyra's wolf cower in recognition of something greater. The lead wolf stepped forward, female, ancient, scarred from battles fought before empires existed. Her thoughts crashed into Elyra's mind like an avalanche. Why have you come, First Blood? Why disturb the sacred lands? Elyra dropped to her knees. Not from weakness, from respect. I seek the Moonveil bloom, to break a curse killing my bloodline. The primordial wolf circled her, studying. Your bloodline has been hunted, destroyed, by those who fear what we were, what we could be again. Yes, and now you come asking for salvation, after your kind abandoned the old ways, after you chose humanity over the wolf. I didn't choose. I survived. There's a difference. Is there? The question hung in the air. The primordial wolf stopped circling.
looked at Elyra with eyes that had seen the rise and fall of kingdoms. You carry the curse of one who hunts the first blood, the king who slaughtered your family, and yet you walk to save him. Why? Because his death means civil war, means millions suffering, means the cycle continues. So you save the monster who destroyed you.
I saved the Empire. He's just part of it. The wolf tilted her head. Interesting. Most would choose revenge. You choose burden. Revenge doesn't stop the curse, doesn't bring back my parents, doesn't change anything except making me feel better for a moment before the emptiness returns. The primordial wolves conferred, thoughts passing between them too fast for Elyra to follow. Finally, the lead wolf spoke again. The Moonveil bloom grows in the heart of the sacred grove, guarded, protected. To take it requires sacrifice. What kind of sacrifice? The wolf stepped closer. To break the curse, you must sever the blood connection that binds you to the human who destroyed your family. To do this, you must choose. Remain human and watch him die, or embrace what you truly are and save him by becoming something you can never undo. Elyra felt her chest tighten. You're saying I have to fully transform, become pure wolf, not pure wolf. First wolf. The original bloodline, the ones who walked between worlds. You will gain power beyond what you've known, but you will lose the human comfort of pretending you belong in their cities, their courts, their civilized world. So I save him, but lose myself. You gain yourself. You lose the mask. The distinction mattered. Elyra had spent 16 years pretending, hiding, keeping the wolf caged because being human meant safety. But safety had been an illusion. The Empire had tried to kill her anyway. Her human life had been borrowed time. Maybe it was time to stop borrowing. I'll do it, she said. The primordial wolves led them deeper into the wastes, to a grove hidden beneath ancient trees that grew in patterns that looked almost like protection. In the center, beneath the rising moon, a single flower bloomed. Moonveil bloom. It glowed with light that didn't come from any natural source, petals that shifted between silver and gold, presence that made the air around it hum. Elyra approached slowly, reached out. The moment her fingers touched the petals, power exploded through her. Not gentle, not gradual, like lightning channeled directly into her veins. She screamed. The transformation wasn't beautiful. It was violent, brutal, her body tearing itself apart and rebuilding, bones cracking and reshaping, muscles tearing and reforming, every nerve screaming. The human parts of her fought, clinging to what they'd always been. To the girl who'd lived in the mountains, to the healer who used herbs instead of claws. But the wolf was stronger and older, and it had been waiting 16 years to break free. Elyra's vision shifted, colors changing, scents sharpening, sounds crystallizing into information her human mind had never been able to process. She felt the curse inside her, saw it clearly now, black tendrils wrapped around her heart, connected to Draven through blood and magic and fate. She grabbed the tendrils with claws that had emerged fully, tore them free. The curse fought back, tried to hold on, tried to complete its purpose and kill them both. But she was stronger now. First blood, original magic, power that predated the curse by millennia. She ripped the curse free, felt it scream, felt it dissolve into nothing, and then the transformation completed. Elyra stood on 4 legs, massive, silver, marked with patterns that glowed like moonlight. She was beautiful. She was terrifying. She was exactly what the Empire had tried to eliminate. The primordial wolves bowed. Welcome home, First Blood. Cressida stared, unable to speak, unable to process what she'd just witnessed. Elyra felt her mind expand, felt connections to every wolf in the Empire, felt the weight of bloodline and history and responsibility settle onto her shoulders. This was what she'd been born to be. Not a healer hiding in the mountains, but a leader, a force, the living embodiment of the power humanity had feared and destroyed. She thought of Draven, felt the curse lift from him across hundreds of miles, felt his heartbeat strengthen, felt him wake from the edge of death. He would live. The Empire would survive. And she had paid the price. The primordial wolf approached. You have chosen well, but the choice is not complete. You can remain in this form. Live among us in the sacred lands. Or you can return to the world that fears you and fight to change it. Elyra thought about that, about staying here, away from politics and betrayal and the constant weight of pretending to be something she wasn't. It would be easier, safer. But the Empire needed changing, needed someone who understood both worlds, who could bridge the gap between human and wolf, who could show them that the First Blood wasn't a threat to eliminate, but a heritage to reclaim. She shifted back to human form. The transformation was easier now, natural, like changing clothes instead of tearing herself apart. "I'm going back," she said. Her voice came out steady despite everything. "To finish what we started." The primordial wolf nodded. "Then go. And remember, you walk between worlds now. That is both gift and burden." They traveled back faster than they'd come. Elyra didn't tire anymore, didn't struggle with the altitude or the cold. Her body had changed fundamentally, stronger, more resilient, built for survival in ways human flesh never could be. Cressida watched her with something between fear and awe. "You're different." "Yes." "Does it hurt?" "No. It feels like waking up, like I've been asleep my whole life and finally opened my eyes." "What happens now? Now we go back, face whatever's waiting, and try to build something better than what was." They reached Blackthorn Citadel on the 38th day. The gates stood open, guards posted but not aggressive. The citadel looked the same but felt different, like something fundamental had shifted in her absence. They walked through streets where people stopped and stared, whispers following them. The healer who'd left to save the king, the noble who'd abandoned politics for principle, returning alive when everyone assumed they'd die. The great hall was packed when they entered. Nobles, soldiers, servants, all gathered because word had spread that Elyra had returned. And in the center, standing beside the throne, Draven waited. He looked different, stronger, the curse's shadow gone from his face, his eyes clear. But there was something else there too, something that looked like understanding. He saw her and everything else in the room disappeared. "You're alive," he said. "So are you." They stood there, the king and the woman who'd saved him, separated by the length of the hall, by everything that had happened, by the weight of bloodlines and empires and choices that couldn't be undone. Then Draven walked forward, crossed the distance, stopped in front of her. Up close she could see the gratitude, the exhaustion, the knowledge that he owed her a debt that could never be repaid. "The curse is broken," he said quietly. "I know. I felt it when it lifted. How? I became what I was always meant to be. What your family tried to destroy." She let her eyes shift, just for a moment, just enough for him to see. Draven didn't flinch, didn't step back, just nodded slowly. "I'm sorry," he said, "for your parents, for the purge, for every terrible choice I made because I thought fear was the same as strength. It's not enough. I know, but it's all I have." Elyra felt the anger she'd carried for 16 years, the rage, the grief, all of it still there, still real. But alongside it was something else. Understanding that Draven had been 17 when his father died, had inherited a kingdom built on fear and violence, had made choices he thought would keep the Empire stable. They were the wrong choices, but they'd been made by someone trying to survive an impossible situation, just like her. "We're going to change things," she said. "The Empire, the way it treats the old blood. All of it." Draven met her eyes. "How?" "By showing them we're not the enemy, by rebuilding alliances your father destroyed, by proving that strength doesn't have to come from fear. The noble houses won't accept it. Then we'll change the noble houses. Replace the ones who refuse. Build something new from the pieces of what broke. That could take years." "Good. I'm not going anywhere." Draven's mouth curved slightly. Not quite a smile, but close. "You've changed." "Yes. I stopped pretending to be human, started embracing what I am. You should try it. I am human. No, you're a wolf who's been pretending to be civilized. There's a difference." The truth of that settled between them. Draven had spent his whole life building walls, keeping the wolf caged, ruling through discipline instead of instinct. But instinct was what had kept him alive, what had made him fight even when the curse should have killed him, what had made him trust Elyra when logic said he shouldn't. In the weeks that followed, they rebuilt.
Malric stood trial. Evidence presented properly. Witnesses called. The noble houses had to choose. Support a traitor who'd admitted to cursing the king or support the throne. Most chose the throne. The ones who didn't were given a choice. Leave the empire peacefully or face execution for treason. Most left. Draven issued a proclamation. The old bloodlines were no longer enemies of the state. Survivors were invited to return. Given land, given positions, given the respect their heritage deserved. Some came, cautiously, waiting to see if this was real or another trap. Elyra spent her days searching for them, using her connection to wolves across the empire, finding survivors who'd been hiding just like she had. One by one, they emerged. 3 others carrying the first blood. A man in the southern territories who'd been living as a fisherman, a woman in the west who'd